Shalom, shalom, family. Peace, 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 peace. I speak peace. I speak peace to your families. I speak peace to every troubling situation in your life. May the Most High God, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, give you peace in your minds, in your hearts, in your souls. I know this is a time of family gathering. Whether you celebrate the holiday or not, usually this is a time of family gathering and for some a time of reflection. And sometimes reflecting on things of the past during this times, maybe a loved one has passed on that you didn't get to resolve an issue with, or it may be something within yourself. People usually tend to do a lot of reflecting on their lives and things, especially going into a new year, the ending of a new year. There are a lot of things that people have regrets about. And so oftentimes what tends to happen is that we do what we've been told to do and taught to do, and that sort of repress feelings, repress memories, things that have not uh, been productive in our lives, things that have not been our fault, uh, especially since when we were children. There are a lot of things that have been falling us as children, and not just in the Black community, but people as a whole, that oftentimes we rarely get resolution. We rarely get answers. And those things often go into our adulthood. Eric Badu years ago talked about the bag lady, right? And she says, you're going to hurt yourself dragging all those bags like that, right? And oftentimes, this is what we do year to year, every cycle around the sun. That's a shot to you flat earthers. Every shot around the sun, we drag baggage year after year after year after year, relationships that didn't go well, whether they're with a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a husband or a wife, mother or father, sister, brother, aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, relationships that we find ourselves involved in. We carry this baggage, these unresolved issues, things that we need answers to, things we've never gotten answers to before. And oftentimes we fail to realize that it's because of these things that we have difficulties even having conversations with other people about them. We can't share them. And I'm a firm believer that when you have things like that befall you in your life that are hurtful and that are painful, unresolved issues that you carry, maybe your father wasn't around, maybe your mother didn't treat you so well, or vice versa. People are abandoned, orphaned, left with family members. People and feelings are unprotected. People who feel unprotected in life, they go through these various things and they hold them in. And as you grow into adulthood, we rarely find any resolution with these things. And I'm a firm believer that people that hold these things in, these are people that usually later on in years, they have issues with cancer. They have a lot of internal issues and sickness and health sickness, mental health. is something that's rampant in our communities. We don't seek help when we need it. There's nothing wrong, black people and black men, especially black men, but black men and black women, listen, there's nothing wrong with therapy. And here's the thing, your homie and your girl that you hang out with, both men and women, although their intentions may be well, you have to realize they're not professionally equipped to deal with some of the things that you have. Even your spouse or that person that's laying next to you on the pillow, you may share with them and they be able to listen to you and they may sympathize with you. They may even able to help you through a situation by being there and being comforting. But sometimes you got to realize that they're not professionally equipped to deal with the mental anguish and the things that a lot of us have gone through in life. And it's okay. And we need to say this. It's okay in the black community, especially among our black men. It's okay to seek help. Go talk to somebody professionally. Professionally. A lot of these services are free. They're free. But there's a stigma in the black community, especially among black men, that somehow that shows a weakness. And see, when people talk about toxic masculinity, which is really only an ideology, there's nothing, there's no gene or there's no chemical in the body that produces toxic masculinity. It's only an ideology or learned behavior. It really doesn't exist. I'm gonna get into that one day. We're gonna talk about masculinity and toxic masculinity and these type of things and where they came from and where they originated from. Some of you are gonna be surprised where these things originated from. But to me, that is what toxic masculinity is, right? Is that men have been taught when you fall and scrape your knee, you get up, you don't cry. We often teach that to our sons. But what that does is, and it has the adverse effect that when you feel pain or you experience something unpleasant in life, you don't express it through emotion, right? You don't express it. You don't seek out nurturing, right? You don't seek out the comfort. You don't seek out the things that you need in order to deal with that pain appropriately. We just teach our young black boys to suck it up. And it's that seed that begins to produce that toxic behavior. That's what I call toxic masculinity. When we're out of touch with our feelings in the degree that we haven't been taught to express them in a proper way. And those things, as they are internalized, become pressure, right? Physically and mentally, they become pressure. And if you know anything about pressure, if it's contained, that pressure will cause an explosion. And often that's what we see in the behaviors of a lot of our men and women. But especially in our men, we see a lot of these expressions or this acting out of this behavior because of this internalized pressure of not being able to express our feelings in a healthy manner without feeling as if we're less masculine or even being in fear of reprisal of someone telling us you're soft or someone telling us you're weak or someone telling you, little boys, that's not what boys do. Boys don't cry. And so we hear that from people that we trust growing up. And so what do you think we do with that? We internalize that. And then it becomes a conflict. I'm experiencing pain right now, but I've just been told that if I do that, then I'm failing. If I express my anger because I've been wronged, if I express it in a way that I'm seeking out nurturing, that I'm saying that thing hurts me, instead of saying the wrong that has been done to me, I'm hurting and I need nurture. I need someone to guide me to a place where it's okay, where I can feel safe to express myself, to express the hurt and the pain that I have without acting it out violently. That it's okay to say I'm not okay. I was taught this as a young man, and it took me years to understand that you have to be able to say, I'm not okay. You have to be able to say, I'm not doing so well. That because someone wronged me, that I don't just have to suck it up and keep it to myself. And then we wonder why we act out things with our loved ones. And it's usually the people that are closest to us that we hurt the most, because that pressure of not being able to release those feelings that have built up since we were children and up until adulthood, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years of pressure of simply not being able to say, I'm hurting, because I don't want to be looked at as less of a man. I don't want to be looked at as weak. I don't want to be looked at as a failure of a man. I don't want to be looked at as effeminate. I don't want to be looked at as girly. That's the toxic masculinity that we develop. But those things are taught in learned behaviors. You're not born that way. We're not born that way. Those things are taught. And as men, we fight this daily. We fight this daily. How and when is appropriate to express my anger? Am I moving in the right direction? How do I respond to this without losing my identity in society? How do I express myself and how do I get help without being or seemingly as though as I'm weak? This is the only way that I know to protect my feelings, right? Is to act out in a violent manner. Because we haven't been exposed to the vehicles and the outlets that allow us to appropriately address our feelings. And so oftentimes, what happens is that as young boys and young women too, but as young men, we're taught not to express our feelings and not to show emotion and to suck up the pain, to neglect the healing power of nurturing, right? There's a healing power in nurturing. That's one of the things that makes women powerful. But we fail to realize that men also have the power to nurture. But society has made us callous to that, has told us that that's not manhood, that that's weakness, that that's an issue for you as a man. And then it tells our young women that that's not a man. He shouldn't be nurturing. He shouldn't be crying. He shouldn't be expressing his feelings in an appropriate manner. Why? because now he sounds like a little girl, or now he sounds like a bitch. He's bitching. You sound like a little girl if you're expressing yourself. These are the things that aid toxic masculinity. And so what we need to do as adults, if you find yourself in these situations, talk to someone. And when I say talk to someone, I'm talking about talk to someone professionally. Because a lot of us feel like we're talking with, if I just can talk to my girlfriend, if I could just talk to my homie, I'll get. But here's the thing, and I will say this. My father used to teach me, and he still teaches this, right? And my father used to teach me that you'd be lucky in life to have one person that you can really and truly call your friend. If you have two people like that in your life, consider yourself an anomaly. Consider it a phenomenon in your life that has occurred. If you can find two people that you can truly call your friends. And here's another thing that we have to understand when we're talking about friendship, right? If you have someone in your life that you call a friend and they can't correct you when you're wrong and tell you, say, hey, you fucking up right now, excuse my language, and say, hey, listen, you're not doing what you know you should be doing as a husband, as a father, as a brother, as a mother, as a sister, as a wife, or even just as a productive citizen. If they can't tell you that without you becoming angry at them and dismissing everything that they have to say, then that's truly not your friend. In your mind, you really don't value their friendship. You don't value their friendship. And if you can't tell them the same thing, then you're not their friend. You're not their friend. If a person can't come to you who you talk to every day, who hang out with you every day, who you share everything with mostly, if they can't tell you when you messing up, then stop lying to yourself that you think that you feel like that's your friend, because that's not truly how you feel about them. You're only okay with them because they agree with you. You're only around them all the time because they agree with your pain. They don't challenge you to change. They don't challenge you to grow in a positive manner. And simply, they're not your friend. They're simply your trash receptacle that you dump in constantly. You constantly dump it. You're not imparting anything of wisdom and knowledge and understanding that would allow them to grow, because those things come to challenge your shortcomings, right? And if you have a friend that's around you constantly, or a person that's around you constantly, and they never challenge your shortcomings, that's not a friend. They don't consider your health and your well-being, because that's what friends do. When they see you going astray, they say, hey, look, that's not the way to go. Or if they can't tell when you're killing yourself physically and emotionally, that they don't tell you to seek some help. That's not your friend. If they're not doing that, and if you don't allow them the space to do that, you're not their friend. But a lot of times what we have is we have things that we deal with because we internalize so much pain. We become untrusting, or we internalize so much pain in our younger years, in our life as children, that what we tend to do is we tend to lash out and act out against people that we come in contact with, because that's the only space that we've learned to operate in, is within that pain. And what happens is that pain becomes therapeutic for you because you can't identify, you don't know who you are. You're looking at yourself in the mirror, and without the feeling of that pain, you don't know who you are. So you retreat back to that comfort zone of pain. And people don't realize that a lot of times their comfort zone is in pain. So oftentimes we hear people say, look, I'm going through something, I'm dealing with an issue, and the first thing they do is they go to the fridge, get out the biggest pint of ice cream that they can find, the biggest pack of cookies, and they just start eating. And you ain't hungry, but now you have what they call it what? Comfort food. You just start eating, 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 eating. All the while, you're living within that pain, right? And you're addressing it by overindulging in food and don't realize you're killing yourself because you know it's not healthy. You know it's not healthy for you. But because you don't know any other way to deal with that pain, you only act out the thing that you know is comforting to you, but it's killing you. It's killing you. You got high blood pressure, hypertension, sugar diabetes. But yet you internalize that pain and you go right to the fridge and slowly begin to commit suicide. That's what you do. That's what happens. And what I'm saying is we often act out our pain in ways that we internalize and they begin to kill us from the inside out. And if we don't get the help that we need, even in our younger years up until our adulthood, oftentimes what we do is we start telling other people, well, you know how I deal with it when I have these issues. You start perpetuating that thought and that understanding that, hey, if you're dealing with something internally, do what I do, girl. Hey, man, do what I do. Girl, what do you do? Girl, I just get me a big old tub of ice cream and I get me some cookies and I just sit back and eat to comfort myself, to ease my pain for the moment. And you know what they say? Yeah, okay. I don't see how that works, but okay. And then as soon as they experience some pain, what comes to them? Well, so-and-so says she goes to the refrigerator and gets some cookies and ice cream. Maybe I'll try it. And then they do the same thing. Now they're killing themselves. Or you have men say, you know what, man? Hey, if I want to release this stress, you know what? I'm just gonna go find me 3, 4, 5, 6 women to sleep with. I'm just gonna sex it away. Solange said that in one of her songs. She thought she was dealing with eternal issues and dealing with certain things, and she thought she could sex it away. Not realizing killing your spirit. Men do this often. They feel like they can sex their pain away. And so they have 5 babies over here and 5 babies over there and another 10 babies down the street trying to sex away their pain. No regards to the lives that you're creating and responsible for, because you simply sexing away. I often hear people say it's like when you don't deal with the internal issues that you have and you only deal with the external issues, it's just like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. Just saying, yeah, I fixed the problem. I fixed the problem. But no, you didn't. You just did something temporary. But you're still bleeding. you're still losing. You're still failing. And so some of us, we're looking at the title and it says predators, sexual predators are made. They're not born. Right? Sexual predators are made. They're not born. And oftentimes, those of us who hear these situations and certain things, and when people tell us that they've been traumatized in life, no one listens. And this just doesn't happen to men and women. It happens, or women, men or women, but it happens to both, especially in our community, in our Black community, especially when we talk about sexual trauma. Sexual trauma in the Black community, this does not affect Black women, but it also affects Black men, little Black boys and little brown boys. It affects them as well. We can find study after study after study after study, report after report after report after report, how sexual trauma in our communities affects our young daughters, how it affects our sisters, how it affects our mothers, how it affects the women in our lives. But there's very little data on how sexual trauma affects little Black boys and little brown boys in our communities. Oftentimes, when we hear these things, you start to hear and you start to see, or even ask yourself, when it comes to sexual trauma as in regards to little Black boys and little brown boys, does it affect them in the way that it affects little brown girls and little Black girls in our communities? Is there a divide there? How is it addressed? How do we feel about the stories of Black men who talk about sexual abuse that they've experienced and the trauma that they've experienced as children versus when we hear it about women? Oftentimes, I must admit that I have to really think about it when I hear stories or things about men who talk about experiencing sexual trauma as children. I have to really think about it sometimes. And it's just a natural reaction. As opposed to when you hear about it happening to women, we automatically know that that's something that's wrong. But we should know that. And brothers, if you don't know that, then you need to really get some help, right? Does it really affect us differently? And so when I'm talking about sexual predators are made, they're not born. I want to talk a little bit about why it's important that we bring these types of issues, especially dealing with our Black men, to the forefront, especially in regarding sexual trauma. We have to bring these things to the forefront because a lot of us are still asking questions. And this is not the answer to all the reasons why, but this is a major issue that Black men deal with, that they keep to themselves, that is not looked upon seriously as other groups. And it speaks as to why we act the way we act, the violent acts that we have towards women and children, a lot of times that you see Black men acting out. And these things, and let me put a plug in this. These things aren't excuses for anyone's behavior, but we need to highlight things so that we can understand and prevent these things when we see them in young children, in young boys, how to recognize these things, right? In Black men and even men that have grown up who've experienced sexual trauma. If you or a loved one, a sister, a niece, a aunt, you yourself personally, if you're engaging in relationships with these types of men who've experienced sexual trauma and some of them express it to you, you have to take that seriously. You have to take that seriously to the degree where you must understand that they need some help because they have the potential of that pressure that we talked about being built up in them for so many years, at some point being triggered and exploding. And you pray that you're not in the vicinity of that individual, of that man, when that pressure explodes, of dealing with that type of trauma for 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 years in life. So this is important for you to be able to even recognize that and not to take it lightly, like so many in the Black community do when it comes to the sexual abuse of little Black boys and little brown boys. We hear about it and people have talked about it, but it's just not enough. It's not enough. And the reason why I know that it's not enough is because in my research on this topic, there's very little information. And when I say very little information, I'm talking about new, recent studies, many different studies. They're really non existent. Very few of them. Very few of them. No one's really observing the sexual abuse of Black boys and how they act that out in adulthood. And how these things are affecting their relationships with Black women and how they're reflecting their relationships with themselves and with their children. I'm not saying this is the only issue that we have to deal with Black men, but it's there. It's one and it's prominent. And because we deal with so many stereotypes, especially about men in our society, and especially in the Black community, right? That having sex is not about, first, about reproducing, right? That sex is something of a badge and honor to wear, especially for young men at an early age or any age. But when it comes to our young girls, they're talked about as whores or being promiscuous or being loose or fast or jazzy, that type of stuff. But when it comes to our little Black boys at early ages and young ages, that it's heralded as some type of conquering or some type of rites to passage, right? And your homies and everybody around and some fathers, they big up in their sons, when they find out their sons lost their virginity as early as 11, 12, 13, 14 years old. The mothers are horrified. But you got the fathers giving the sons high fives. That's toxic masculinity right there. Because you're not understanding that comes with a trauma that is rarely addressed in our communities. That comes with the trauma. Sex comes with a responsibility. Sex comes with consequences. And rarely are those responsibilities and consequences taught to our young boys at an age when sex runs rampant around them. It's in the movies, it's in the TV. You can't even play a video game without the character, the female character, got her breasts out, right? And the blouse is all down to the belt. You know, my son, 8 years old, he'll be 9. And I was watching him play, video game. And I started to look at the characters and how more lifelike they're becoming, how real they're becoming, right? And I'm looking at the age appropriate game, and it says it's like, for ages, like 9 or 10. And then they got for ages like, 8, 17, 12 or 17 or 18 or different things like that. And so I'm looking at it. And what I started to realize was that he likes to play the Arkham, or the Batman game, right? And there's the character that they have from the comic books in the movie, Harley Quinn. And I'm looking at the character, right? Now, she's not the main theme of the video, but when you look at how she's depicted as a female. But the over sexualization of the character, as it's being presented to young children in these video games, it's the big breast, the cleavage showing, the buttocks, the short shorts, and different things like that. These are things that if young boys and young men are visualizing without any understanding of the consequences and the repercussions of what it means to be involved with someone sexually at a young age, these things can be devastating. And so what happens is young boys starts to internalize these things, right? And so then they're the ones that are now teaching your children about sexuality and what it means to be involved or be in the sexual space. They're doing it in the video games. They do it in the movies. They're even doing it in the classrooms as young as 2nd and 3rd grade now. They're sending little papers home and little cartoon books home dealing with topics of sexuality, and not in the area of just the responsibilities against sexual diseases and STDs. Because they're telling your kids it's okay. If you didn't really know at these ages now, they're telling your kids it's okay to have oral sex. That's what they're teaching. It's okay to have oral sex, right? Instead of preaching or teaching total abstinence till you get to an age where you can really understand what you're being involved in and who you're being involved with. They just say, well, just don't do that because that can get you pregnant. And if that gets you pregnant, then you have to deal with this child, and you have to deal with abortion, and you have to do that. But they're not telling you don't have sex as a kid. They're not telling you that anymore. They're just telling you what type of sex to have that you don't get pregnant. And then how, you can protect yourself from an STD, because we know y'all kids and y'all go do it anyway. That shit is crazy. It's crazy. But I want to get into some interesting things. And some of y'all gonna be mad at me, but y'all know me. I'm Elder Yara. Y'all get it. Y'all get it. I was telling them last night, hey, I'm not, I'm cut from a different type of cloth. I'm cut from that Teflon. You understand what I'm saying? I get it. But we're gonna get into some things, right? And I want to talk about some things, and I'm not really trying to, I'm going to bring up some familiar people that you guys are familiar with, and we're going to talk about these things, right? And so I want to show some things, right? I'm going to show some things. I'm going to share my screen, and I want you guys to see something. Let's talk about it.
teacher.
Let me go back. There we go.
Teacher arrested, accused of having a sexual relationship with a student. Police arrested 26-year-old Sarah Brooks yesterday, and now she's charged with sexual assault by person of authority. She's accused of being sexually involved with a senior at Archer High School. The school district now telling us Brooks has resigned.
Also new at 5, a Bartow County school system employee faces a list of charges following accusations that she was having inappropriate relationships with students. The Bartow County Sheriff's Office took Heather Kishen into custody this morning. According to the Sheriff's Office, the complaint said that Kishen was involved in a sexual relationship with several students at Appalachia High School. The 35-year-old's charged with child molestation, furnishing alcoholic beverages to persons below the legal age, and sexual assault against a person enrolled in school. Kishen is being held at the Bartow County Detention Center awaiting a first court appearance.
In March 2019, Windham police began investigating Laura Amro, the superintendent of Windham schools, after they were contacted by a concerned parent. There were disturbing allegations that Amro pursued sexual relationships with at least two 16-year-old students while she was principal at Windham High, and that some of the encounters happened in her office. During questioning by police, she denied being the woman in a video being shared around the school by students. But the officer advised her there was evidence of her illegal relationship with one of the boys on Snapchat and in text messages. The 35-year-old must now serve 10 years in prison after pleading guilty to charges involving two of those 16-year-old boys. Natalie, she revealed in court that she is pregnant and is due in March. The court decided that she will begin serving the prison term 2 weeks after the baby is born.
Northwestern middle school teacher Ella Ray Silva is behind bars and accused of having sex with a 15-year-old student. The East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office says Silva and the student were in a relationship over the summer. According to an arrest warrant, Silva sent nude photos and videos to the victim. It also says they had sex several times and that she picked him up from his home without his parents' consent. Reports say Silva also gave him an e-cigarette with THC. That arrest warrant also states that Silva asked the victim not to report their relationship because it would affect her career and family. She was arrested and booked Thursday on several charges, including carnal knowledge of a juvenile, indecent behavior with juveniles, and contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile.
So developing at this hour, a Kellyville high school teacher faces rape charges, accused of sleeping with her 18-year-old student.
25-year-old Kaylin Thompson, an English teacher at Kellyville High, resigned mid-April. Detectives say that's the day they started investigating her for allegedly sleeping with her 18-year-old student. Detectives say this happened twice, once at Hebron Lake and once at a Tulsa motel. And they say that they got an arrest warrant for her on Friday, but she turned herself in this morning at 10 a.m. Digging deeper, in Oklahoma, a consensual relationship is 16 years old, but detectives say this isn't consensual because she's his teacher, an authority figure. So the student must be at least 20 years old.
Former Munster teacher arrested last year, accused of having sex with a 16-year-old and 18-year-old student, has avoided jail time in a plea deal with prosecutors.
Lynn Burge is a former teacher at Munster High School. An arrest warrant states Burge sent nude pictures of herself to a 16-year-old boy through Snapchat in the fall of 2017, then went backroading and drank alcohol with him before taking the student to her home and having sex with him. Then last March, pulled the same routine with an 18-year-old male student. She admitted to having sex with the 18-year-old, which is illegal because she was his teacher at the time. She admitted to almost everything the 16-year-old said happened, but told investigators she couldn't remember if they had sex since she was also intoxicated at the time. An anonymous tip about Burge was sent to the Department of Family and Protective Services, who investigated for a month before informally interviewing Burge. Instead of serving time, the former high school teacher was given 5 years probation. She'll also pay a $2,500 fine for each offense, according to the district attorney.
Well, as part of the deal, Burge is also ordered to surrender her teaching license. The district attorney said in a statement they believe this is a just and appropriate plea after consulting with the families of the victims.
New tonight, investigators say a former teacher was arrested for having an inappropriate relationship with a student. They said they got a tip about a possible inappropriate activity in May, then investigated and arrested Jillian Reynolds today. She is scheduled to appear in court June 27th. Investigators say the case involves a student at Union Pines High.
Police believe this woman, 27-year-old Sarah Fowlks, engaged in sexual contact with a 17-year-old male student. She was arrested today and posted bond just hours later. Fowlks has been with the Lockhart Independent School District since the fall of 2014. She's now been suspended by the district. Lockhart's ISD superintendent says the district does not tolerate any improper communication or contact between a teacher and a child.
Crime Beat now, a substitute teacher is behind bars accused of inappropriate sexual conduct with students. Delhi Charter School administrators contacted Richland Parish sheriffs yesterday about allegations involving 29-year-old Brittany Kirby and two male students. RPSO investigators learned during the investigation Kirby had engaged in inappropriate sexual conduct over the past 3 months with those two students. When questioned by investigators, Kirby admitted to the allegations. She is charged with 2 counts of felony carnal knowledge of a juvenile.
A Madison County teacher is on administrative leave tonight, accused of sexual misconduct with a student. Sheriff's deputies arrested Catherine Coffey today. Investigators looked into allegations made earlier this week. Deputies say there is evidence that Coffey was involved in misconduct between August and December of last year. According to the school district website, Coffey teaches at Madison County Elementary School.
Let me stop that in that video real quick.
Burnett County teacher arrested accused of having a
Me in
sexual
that video
relationship
real
with a
quick.
student. Police arrested 20.
And come back and stop sharing really quickly. And the reason why I brought that out, and we saw that those predators were Caucasian women, right? Dealing with young students, right? And that's usually what we hear and what's told to us, that that type of behavior is much more rampant again among white women and dealing with white students. But what they don't tell you in these stories is that most of these teachers, they're teaching in rural areas or inner city schools where most of the population are African American children. That's the other part. And so it's easy for us to even digest this. And it's a reason why I showed these women here. That's a lot easier for us to digest and see these women, these white women, as predators, right? Because we believe, again, our stereotypes that usually that's who are committing these crimes. And that's the story that we take, right? Well, that's mostly white women that do that, right? When it comes to students, right? But who looks into our inner city communities, our inner city schools, and our neighborhoods where the predators, the sexual predators, are Black women? Who talks about that? Where's the data on that? When we talk about trauma as a whole, right? We have to understand this thing in its totality, right? Sexual predators are made, they're not born. There's no gene, there's no chemical in the body, there's no endorphins that are released at a higher level than others that produces a sexual predator from birth. There's no genetic displacement, right? Or no DNA that's been isolated that shows that this person is a sexual deviant from the womb. Right? Now, you can make an argument if you talk spiritually, right? In a spiritual sense, right? Are spirits attached to children in the womb? And as they come out, these spirits carry with them and they walk with them, right? Or genetically speaking, and some people will say, well, it's a possibility. But this is what I'm saying. There's no scientific evidence that people are born sexual predators. It doesn't exist. It just does not exist. Right? There's no such thing as people, and I'm reading this out the chat, that people are born bad, right? See, that's where the excuses come in at. No, what we have is learned behavior. Learned behavior. Right? Or classical conditioning, or Pavlov's law. When children are placed in an environment that are not conducive for them to be healthy or to think in a healthy manner. But no one's born that way. Right? But let's get into it, right? And show this white women to show how biased we are, even stereotypically, when it comes to this particular issue about sexual trauma among Black boys in our communities. And I did this to prove something to the people that are listening and some of the people that are in the chat. Because the responses that I saw in the chat, and thank you guys for being a part of my experiment today. The responses that I saw that, yeah, this happens more among white women than Black women. That's a generalized statement that there's no observable data to support that statement. Because it's not being looked into with the degree as we see with white female sexual predators. There's nothing to support that. And so we've already taken a biasness. We already have a confirmation biases in regards to sexual trauma and over-sexualization of Black boys in our community. That it can't possibly come from within. It can't possibly come from the Black woman in dealing with young Black boys and sexual trauma. It's impossible. Because that's not what we do. But the white women, yeah. But Black women, no, that's not us. That's impossible. What are we basing that on? What observable data are we basing that on? I'm just asking the question. But let's go a little bit further. Let me show you guys something. Let me show you guys something. I'm going to share my screen again. Second part of my experiment.
I loved it.
Lil Wayne is a living legend. In fact,
I loved it.
Lil Wayne is a living legend. In fact, the Carter 3 has always been my favorite CD, but unfortunately, recently I did lose it after leaving it at the bathroom at the Notre Dame Cathedral. Weezy has had a long and fruitful career, dropping 12 albums, winning 5 Grammys, and sleeping with so many women, I can only assume he's caught as many STDs as Ash Ketchum has caught Pokemon. Legend has it, Wayne has slept with thousands of women, which is understandable considering the fact that he calls himself the Pussy Monster and released a song saying he wanted to bang every girl in the world. Those lyrics probably should have come with a disclaimer saying every girl in the world over 18.
How old are you, baby? Oh no, put her back. Put her back.
So it's safe to assume that Lil Wayne has one of the highest libidos in hip-hop, despite what his lackluster threesome sex tape video would have you believe. But the glamour of Lil Wayne's love life was punctured in 2009 when a clip from his unauthorized Carter documentary released, showing him telling a story recounting his first time having sex at age 11.
I was fucking at 11.
But what's interesting about this clip is the role that Birdman seems to play in instigating a seemingly illegal and abusive sexual encounter for the preteen Wayne.
I'm gonna do you like baby them did me. Yeah. I never forget the word. Suck Lil Wayne, let dick.
I personally found this kind of hard to watch because the whole thing goes from harmless backstage banter to an episode of Surviving R.Kelly real quick. Just for context, this is the moment in the documentary where Lil Wayne starts asking about the sexual activity of his 15-year-old protege, Justin Bieber's designated driver, and the Disney Channel's very own Debo, Lil Twist. Wayne goes on to suggest that he's going to do Lil Twist like Birdman did to him, and he then recounts a story of being 11 years old in a studio surrounded by men, including Birdman, whilst he's pressured along with another underage girl into performing a sex act.
There was about this many niggas and shit too in that bit. I mean, was like, told me, girl with your good dick. Girl, you know you sit with your good dick suck and that boy, that bitch suck all nick. Have a nick. I'm sitting there like, sure, yeah. Suck up.
In 2019, this story comes across a lot less like harmless fun and a lot more like a deeply troubling tale of sexual abuse, especially considering the implication that him and the girl were egged on and maybe pressured by Birdman and his crew. If you don't know Birdman, aka Baby, he is the Cash Money Records honcho who signed Lil Wayne when he was a child.
Lil Wayne is a part of the Hot Boys, which will be doing his solo album.
And refers to himself as the #1 stunner, despite how his face looks. His nickname #1 stunner is supposed to refer to his flashy lifestyle, constantly showing off an amazing selection of cars, incredible selection of watches, and a terrible array of tattoos. This includes a giant star tattooed on the top of his cue ball head, which I don't know whether I need to slap or take back to Gohan so I can become a Super Saiyan. It sounds a lot like Birdman instigated this act, and it's highly possible that by doing this, he may have even committed a crime. But if you're hoping to see Birdman prosecuted for this, you're out of luck, because not a lot of people know this, but he is actually immune from prosecution by having diplomatic immunity.
I'm good anywhere in the motherfucking world, you hear me? I could do, basically, they can't bring me to jail. I could total scrap, I'm good with anything but a murder.
Well, I suppose his diplomatic certificate would be a little bit more impressive had the word diplomat been spelled correctly. I actually did look into this a little bit more, and it turns out it is true. Birdman is immune from prosecution, but only for crimes committed against the electro DJ Diplo. In addition to this story, many people have speculated over the years that something fishy has been...
So here's what I'm saying. So we see at 11 years old, Lil Wayne, one of the biggest hip hop / rock stars in the world in the last decade, at least. And you see the casual exchange of him being surrounded by other black men. He tells the story about how at 11 years old, he's involved or pressured, right, into having this sexual encounter with a young black woman, right? And so what happens is that we see this glorification of it in our communities. We see this glorification of it. And I'm bringing this up because I'm dealing with both sides. It's not just black women and not just talking about black men. I'm talking about the over-sexualization and sexual trauma that young men deal with in life. Like, let's elevate the conversation, right? Because most of you fail to be able to do that because you're still stuck in your traumas. You haven't healed. So the issue is that, as I was saying earlier, it's glorified. It's glorified. And trust me, Lil Wayne's statement here about being pressured to have sex at 11 years old is a story that is widespread among young black men and black men as a whole in our communities. That's something that's talked about often in the barbershops. Yeah, I'm telling you, right? That's something that's talked about often. And often what you see is what you saw in that scene. Him surrounded by young black men who've probably been through the same trauma. And the stigma of that trauma being made to feel like a badge of honor, then understanding that they are victims of sexual abuse at the hands of an adult or facilitated by the hands of an adult. It's more prevalent in our communities today with our young black boys. So when we're looking for reasons and ways and trying to understand why do they act out in certain ways, why do they seemingly have an aversion towards our women, towards black women, why do they seem to be less empathetic or not sympathetic to the understanding of black women and what it means, the sexual trauma and even rape. You have an 11-year-old who's now forcibly put in a situation that he's been sexually abused. Do any of us think that that was his first and last encounter sexually, beginning at 11 years old? No. Now he's perpetuating that over-sexualization and that behavior. And as you seen in the video, he even he's grooming other young boys, black boys in the community, taking that trauma and passing it on. Because why? It's been perverted to a degree where now it's being used as a badge of honor and everyone around him supports that. And we don't and it seems as though we can't understand what's wrong with our black boys and why they act out the way they act out sexually. Why they act out the way they act out towards women. I keep telling you people, when you have men who are serial abusers or men who abuse women, there's not a switch that happens at 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, that they wake up and they flip the switch and now they're an abuser. They're a sexual predator. There's no switch that's flipped on at these ages. These things are seeds that have been planted in them at early ages in their lives. And these seeds are gone unaddressed and they're growing. For Lil Wayne, 11 years old to 15 years old to 20 years old to 25 years old. This seed has grown and now he's perpetuating this behavior that now he's teaching this trauma to other black boys and black boys. And instead of understanding that he's a victim, he doesn't even know he's been victimized. He doesn't even know he's a victim and that what he's expressing and what he's acting out and what he's teaching others is more victimization. Now he becomes the sexual predator. Do y'all understand what I'm saying? Now he becomes the sexual predator. Why? Because now he's teaching that behavior, that toxic behavior to another. But we dismiss this, oh, well, it happens. Yeah, we acknowledge it happens. But to what degree do you acknowledge it? What degree do you understand it? What degree do we understand it? Sexual predators are made, they're not born. They're not born that way. They're made. They're made by men and women in the society that take advantage of children, that are taking advantage of our Black boys. And because no one has presented or focused their spotlight on Black boys as sexual predators, or spotlighted on them as sexual or victims, I should say, of sexual predators, we only see them as sexual predators. As Hillary Clinton termed or said years ago in the Bill Clinton campaign, these super predators, as she was referring to a 14-year-old young Black child. He's a super predator. Not addressing or attempting to understand who created him. He's not born that way. He's not born that way. So these are not excuses. But the problem is that these victims of sexual abuse of our young boys in the Black community, they grow up and they begin to pass this behavior along, or they continue to act it out. And then by the time we see it or we hear their predatory actions, or they're monsters. These Black men are nothing but monsters. But if you understand Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which really had to do with Black men, and we'll talk about that, and the sexual inferiority of white men in regards to Black men's size of the penis, and that penis envy, that different types of thing. It dealt with the sexual predatory actions of Black men, right? They wanted us Black men to be viewed as monsters, to stay away, and for white women to stay away from Black men. So they viewed Black men in this light, right, as this monster, right? But everybody knows who Frankenstein is. They know he's pieced together from parts of the dead, and how he was given life, right? And the hideous look and the fear that comes along with dealing with this monster and recognizing this monster. Everybody knows about that, but nobody ever talks about the crime that the creation has committed, and then how it's never talked about the creator, the one responsible for creating this abomination. No one talks about those who are creating these abominations that we see in our communities, because that's what you guys are referring to them as. You're referring to Black men and Black boys as abominations, those that don't deserve to live. Hashtag abort. You want us to believe that these monsters in the community are born that way. Sexual predators are made, not born. We have to understand, when we've been spoon-fed these things that are have not been scientifically studied or observable, that these narratives are simply pushed to demonize and not to rejuvenize, or these things are being reported to demonize and not to build up. And so all we see is predators. That's all you see. That's all you see. And you've taken your hands off what you've been responsible for. You've taken your hands off. You step back from what you created, from what you made, and not at birth. Not at birth. The issue is not you giving birth to black men, to black boys. That's not the issue. The issue is, what are you doing with them after you've given birth to them? What are you teaching them? What are you not teaching them? So you have to go with the argument that the male seed, the black male seed in of itself intrinsically is evil. Oh, but to the contrary, no data to support that foolishness. You lack understanding. It's simply a lie. No one's born a predator. But what you have is learned behavior. I suggest that some of you actually start doing research, because this is a psychological issue. This is a mental health issue, right? But psychology speaking, study Bonifer's rings. Some of you need to really study that, because you're listening to things and you don't know how to compartmentalize the information you have so that you can take an actual view. You don't know how to put it in the Bunsen burner and break it down chemically so you can understand these things when you hear certain things said to you. Study Bonifer's rings. Bonifer was basically a psychiatrist. I did a paper on him a couple of years ago. And Bonifer espoused this, is that you're mostly influenced, or your behaviors are usually a reflection of those who are closest to you after birth. Once you're birthed and you're brought into this world, the people that have the most influence on you, right, begins to grow. So just like if you took a tree and you cut that tree, you saw that tree down, how they determine the age of a tree is basically how many rings they see once that tree is cut, right? They can count the number of rings, and that'll tell them the age of that particular tree. And that's sort of how Bonifer's rings works, right? So they place an infant child in the middle, and then we look at the rings that circle that child throughout their life, right? And even into adulthood. And you start, the first circle or ring of influence is the mother, right? That's your first circle of influence, is the mother. The second circle of influence is the mother and the father, right? The third ring would be the father, right? And so as it goes out and as you get older, then it's other family members, then that's on one ring, or siblings is on one ring, and then another ring is your grandparents, then on another ring it's your aunts and uncles, then on another ring it's the school teachers, then it's your childhood friends, that's on another ring, and then it's your co-workers, that's on another ring. And so then we start looking at the rings of influences in the individual's lives, and based on their relationship and their experiences within those rings, we can get a good understanding of how that person's life is turned out and how they behave and how they respond to certain things based on their circle of influence. That's where we get that term from Bonifer's theory, that circle of influence. What is your circle of influence? And so we can scientifically, we can observe these things. And so when we look at a child's instance, we can't do it in the womb. It doesn't exist. Right? because that's simply the seed. Your ring of influence only comes at time of birth, and that's outside things that now affect your behavior. And so you look at an individual and you look at the rings that surrounded them, you look at their circle of influence, you really start to get an understanding of why they act out the way they act out. It might be a ring that was a babysitter, and that influence and something traumatic happened within that ring with that person who's had influence on their child. It could have been an uncle, it could have been an aunt, could have been a sister, it could have been a brother, could have been a stepbrother, a stepdad, a teacher that's introduced trauma into that person's ring of life. In that ring of life, their circle of influence. They've introduced that trauma. And now what happens is that one ring, when it becomes affected now in their lives, all of the other rings that they experience is affected by that one ring of trauma that occurred, maybe at birth, and maybe at 5, or maybe at 10, or maybe at 15, or maybe at 20. And until that trauma is addressed, that cycle, that spiral continues. It continues. How do we know this? Even R.Kelly, no doubt he's a sexual predator. No doubt he's a sexual predator. But we should be asking ourselves, not just is he a sexual predator, but how do we stop that? How do we stop sexual predators from being created in our communities? How do we stop that? Because it's our children, our daughters, our sisters, our aunts, our uncles, our nieces, our nephews, our uncles, our brothers, our cousins that can possibly become victims to sexual predators in our community. We have to stop them from the trauma. We have to protect them from the trauma. We have to be able to recognize when these things are occurring so that we can stop the cycle. But we have those who inwardly want to say, no, R.Kelly was just born that way. No, he wasn't born that way. He wasn't born that way. Someone made that sexual predator, and we need to figure out how we stop people and what can we do to stop creating these sexual predators in our communities, because they tend to act out violently. It's young boys who act out violently against women, usually have some type of trauma or sexual trauma that has occurred. We got to understand, people, that there's always a cause and effect. And what you have is empathetic, or you have people who are no longer sympathetic. You have people who are no longer understanding. You have people who lack nurturing skills. You have people who are selfish and incompassionate simply because of what they see the effects, and simply because of what they feel or even what they've experienced. But they continue to experience it. Why? Because they still hear it over and over and over again. It didn't just happen to me, but now it's happening to somebody else, and it's happening in tens and 20s and thousands. But why? Because we've been told to only look at the effects. We've only been told to look at the Frankenstein. Nobody told us to address the creator. Nobody has told us we need to be addressing the mad scientists. They got you looking in the wrong direction, people. You're looking in the wrong direction. You're only dealing with the effects. You're not dealing with the cause. If you don't listen to anything else I ever say, you have to learn to deal with the cause. Because simply dealing with the effects of a situation is only putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. You can talk all you want to about why black men ain't this and black men don't deserve to live and black men and a hashtag abort and do this and do that to black men and this is where they are and they're detrimental to society and you need to move away from them. You need to divest from them. Don't give them your time. They're not worthy of this and not worthy of that. You're only putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, but you're still getting your hands bloody. The amount of blood that you're espousing is still on your feet. It's still on your hands. Because all you're doing is putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound. You're doing nothing to deal with the cause. So your rhetoric and your understanding and your quasi-knowledge is flawed. You're working against yourself. You're perpetuating the issue. Because what happens when you don't address a wound properly? When you don't dress a wound properly? What happens? It becomes infected. It becomes infected. And what happens when a wound becomes infected? The blood becomes infected. And now the person who hasn't, that just not only received the wound that you have to address is infected and they're facing imminent death. But now you have to be more careful as the person addressing the gunshot wound, because now the blood is now contaminated and contagious, and now it's infected, and now you think you're doing something by only addressing the effects, but now you're contaminated, thinking that you're addressing the situation, when only you're perpetuating the infection. You're part of the problem when you're not addressing it correctly. You're part of the problem. You're perpetuating the death of not just those who you deem unworthy, but you're perpetuating your own death because you're putting yourself in harm's way now. You're killing yourself, but not addressing the wound properly, by not sanitizing it, simply speaking over it, not clearing away the vitriol, not clearing away the infection and the pus. You're just smearing it around and thinking you're protecting and thinking you're protecting yourselves. You're not doing that. You're not doing that. That's how most plagues and how most diseases have spread throughout this world in time. The Black Plague, smallpox. Not understanding how to address a disease. You put your own immunity at risk because you're not addressing the issue correctly. Simply saying hashtag abort. You're perpetuating the death. Not of the wounded, but those who care for the wounded. Because some of you are aiding and abetting these infected ones in your sons, in your nephews, your uncles, your brothers, your fathers. You're aiding and abetting it. Oh, we're not talking about hashtagging those that are close to us. No, we're not talking about them. We're not talking about them. No, just those in the future. You're killing yourself because you won't address the cause. All you simply do is look at the effect, and that's the short-sightedness of that argument. That's the failure of that argument. I'm not here to be popular. I'm not here to be unpopular. And I'm not here to make excuses for sexual predators, especially R.Kelly. Now, I'm not making excuses for that. What I'm dealing with is how do we stop it? How are they created? Because they're not born that way. How do we identify the cause? That's where your argument should be. Let me share something else with you people. Let me share something else.
Years younger, not quite.
Yes.
Tell me about your relationship with your brother growing up. Were you guys close?
I mean, we was like the average kids, growing up. Actually, me and Bruce was closer, because by me being the baby, Robert was the baby before me. Now, I put it that way. So when I came along, it's just like maybe I shouldn't have came along. So my mom kind of paid a lot of attention to me because I'm the youngest, and I really needed her help and looked for her guidance. So, he's no longer the baby at this point.
So you guys, it doesn't sound like you were particularly close growing up.
Not really. I mean, yeah and no, because a lot of times I used to try to look for his blessing on different things. By me being the youngest, we played basketball, things of that nature, and I used to want to be like Michael Jordan, like they want to be like Michael Jordan. So I wanted to always look for their approval. Bruce gave it to me pretty much, but Robert, it was a challenge. Because like I said, he was the baby before I was born. So.
And then tell me the order of your siblings, oldest to youngest.
My sister Teresa, she's the oldest. Then it's Bruce. Then Robert, then me.
And Bruce is in prison right now?
He's in the county.
He's in county jail.
Yes.
Okay. Why did you decide to participate or be interviewed for Surviving R.Kelly?
Well, it's a lot of different things. I mean, that my family has endured and went through. I love my brother. A lot of people think that I'm trying to just like destroy his character or destroy him. It's not about that. My thing is, if my mom was here, my mom spoke the truth. And she always taught us to speak the truth. And it's like a lot of things that transpired and happened. I feel bad that I hadn't came forth earlier.
Like what things are you referring to?
I mean, just with the allegations with the girls and different things of that nature. When I was on tour, he used to ask me to go get girls. And I used to tell him, no, that was another reason we fell out. Because what Robert couldn't understand was, how's everybody running around doing everything that he say, but his little brother is being, rebellious toward it.
When you say he used to ask you to get girls, are we talking underage girls?
I mean, to me, they look underage. To me, they look underage. When I looked at them, I seen like my daughter. I'm like, man, she looked young in the face. Oh, you hating on me. I'm like, hating on you for what? I mean, I'm not going to do that, because I don't want nobody doing that to my child, so that's why I pretty much, I got to put this phone on vibrate, but that's why I pretty much got into it with him a lot, because like I said, you got grown people, adults that's working with him that did everything he said, like the puppet master.
Well, since we already kind of touched on it, the Surviving R. Kelly documentary, as you know, or docuseries, brought up a lot of serious allegations about how your brother treats women and also relationships he had with underage girls. Is there truth to those allegations?
I mean, well, he married Aaliyah. I mean, it don't get no truer than that. And these are documents and records that's available for the public. He married her.
Well, we know that happened, but what about, the women that came forth in the documentary and perhaps other women out there who weren't in the documentary, girls who were underage at the time? Do you know firsthand if there was any truth to that?
I mean, I wasn't around to actually see him interact with girls like that as far as on a sexual type of tip. I've seen him, pretty much be interested, like, man, let me get her number, you know. And if I didn't go get it, somebody else went and got the number.
And again, we're talking about girls who appeared to be underage.
Yes.
When was the last time you spoke to your brother?
Why aren't you the landlord? Yes, you. Why aren't you the landlord? Every day.
I believe I spoke to Robert in, I want to say 2000, it might have been 6, whenever the case ended on the child pornography case.
2008.
2008. That's the last time I spoke with him. And when I spoke to him, you know, even though my name was brought up in it, and a lot of people say it wasn't, my face was posted on the news, my name, my character, my liking was brought up in this case, you know, and I was actually watching the news with my children that night, and I seen my face posted on the news, and I'm like, how did that happen? But what happened was, a lot of people don't understand and don't know, I did a lot of doubles for Rob. We don't look that much alike, but you can tell that we're related. And the doubles that I did was in, you remind me of my Jeep, Your Body's Calling. It was a lot of times that I actually had the clothes on that he had on for a particular scene. Robert and his lawyers knew that. So they created reasonable doubt. That's what happened.
So what about what about, you've told me some personal stories, I won't talk about with whom, but what about, you know, people you know of going to the police? Why haven't they gone? Let me start with this. Why haven't they gone to the police? We talked about one particular young girl who's now a woman who says she was in your family, who says she was abused by R.Kelly. Why haven't they come forward, do you think?
Because people are afraid. They, you know, it's basically, this is how I see it, and this is why my family is divided the way that it is. You have the people over here on this side is speaking the truth, and they're not with that. They don't condone it. Then you got people on this side feel like, well, if I ever say anything bad about Robert, and he might not never give me anything, he might not never look, he might cut me off, and that's what they be afraid of.
Do you think your brother treats or has treated underage girls inappropriately, sexually speaking? And if so, why? Does he have issues?
I mean, yes, he do have an issue. Anytime an adult, you know, look at minors or women that's underage, that's anybody. This is not just for Robert. This is any pedophile, any person that has that type of you know, characteristics where they can look at a girl and say, hey, you know, she, you know, you can tell a baby in the face. And what I mean by a baby, you can tell 15, 16, even though some of these girls do be having, you know, they might be, you know, thick, or as they call it, or they might have weight on them, but their face don't lie. You can look in their face and tell that they don't look of age.
But is he a pedophile?
I mean, I can't honestly say that for sure. I just know that he has a problem with control. You know, I love my brother, you know, but he do have a problem. And if anybody out there love him, they should want to see him get help. It's not just about jail time. It's about facing the issues and the different things that he is alleged of doing. I mean, it have to come to a head at some point.
You brought up, is there a reason, do you think, that might have led to this behavior? I think you talked about being molested, correct?
Yes.
You know, that's very painful.
Listen up, people.
Did that happen to your brother too?
Yes, I believe it did. I really believe it did, because the same person that molested me used to make it feel like okay, I did something wrong, so I can't go outside. You know, my mom's going to work, my stepdad going to work, so I mean, this is the only adult figure or teenager that's overseeing us. So I had to actually do everything that they said, and it's been several times that I knew that I can go outside, and Robert had to stay in the house. And when he stayed in the house, I could just imagine what happened to him, because I know what happened to me.
Let me end that right here, family. Let me end that right here. Now, the interviewer asks R.Kelly, at the end of this segment, what do you believe led to R. Kelly's sexual predatory behavior? Because no one's dismissing it. Should definitely have been prosecuted for it. But what led to it? And he clearly goes into their sexual abuse and molestation as children. And how do we know these are still children? Because they still have to ask permission. Can they go outside? They're being cared for by a teenager. This is what he says. The older person that's watching them is supposed to be responsible for them is in their teens. So we know these are young children. These are two young black boys who are experiencing sexual abuse at the hands of an older person in their household. This is what I mean about dealing with the causes versus the effects. We get overly emotional, and as well we should, about the predatory actions of men and women against people who are underage and even people who are of age, rapists, serial rapists. But we only have the mental capacity to strictly just deal with the effects, the acted out behavior. We need to go after the cause. We need to go after the cause. And this is what I mean. Instead of trying to address a specific issue, we still want to look the other way. We only want to deal with the effects. When you ask, why is this happening? You're dealing with the cause. Instead of saying, this is happening, now what do I do? Or because this is happening, now I'm going to react. When your reaction should be with, what is the cause? That's the difference between someone who's an activist or someone that's a revolutionary. They don't deal with the effects of why something's happening. They understand that we have to be active and revolutionize the thinking or the origin or the cause of a behavior. Whether it's racism, white supremacy, where it's sexual abuse, you have to deal with the cause of it. That's a universal law, people. Science has put it in these terms. For every action, there's an equal or opposite reaction. Y'all seen the little thing, often sits on people's desks, and it has the 5 or 6 little metal balls that are hanging from the string, and then you take one ball and you let it swing and it hits the other ball, and then you see the effects of how that one action ends up right on the other end. That energy, right? That energy that's been created. Now it has an effect 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 generations down the line. But most of us are only dealing with what we see is occurring down the line. No one wants to talk about the person that actually caused this action or reaction to occur. And it's prevalent in our communities on how Black people deal with situations and how we deal with unfavorable issues. And this is the thing that we're talking about. And so how you deal with cause right? How you deal with causation is first you have to first observe it. And you observe it through what we know is reactionary things, right? So in order to understand causation, you first must do that, understand it. You must study it. You must see the things that are put in place and the things that are around it that creates these environments. You have to observe the actions. And that's all we do is just observe the actions. But we have to trace those actions back to the cause. It's a universal law. And so again, even in regards to R. Kelly, his actions are abominable. He needed to be stopped. He needed to be stopped. And if that takes prison and jail time, then so be it. He needed to be stopped. But what about the other R. Kellys or sexual predators out there who were first victims of sexual abuse? And that sexual abuse has gone undressed and now they become predators. What about those that are still out there? Both men and women in our communities. They're still out there. And we can't simply just wait around for the effects. We have to look for it. We have to put things in place that protect our children, our young boys, our young girls. We have to put things in place, but we first have to recognize that they are not born that way, that they're made. That they're made. Let me look into one more thing. Let me show you something else, right? Is that it? I want y'all to understand something. Let's see how we see and don't see. And this is fair use. Freedom of Information Act. I'm going to be sharing this information for teaching and training purposes and for discussion and furtherance dealing with the issue of sexual abuse in the Black community. We're not receiving any donations or any funds. But let's look at something, people.
Service office. 20, you stay with Nadine.
Yes, my dear.
Twine, what you looking at out there? What you looking at? That's it. Give me some sugar. Now get on downstairs. What did I say? Get on downstairs. In that basement and drop them. Hurry up. I'm putting them on. Come on.
Come on. Pull him down. You heard me. Pull him down. Pull him right over my feet. Get over here close. Closer. You don't have to be afraid. Now touch me. You know you want him. Yeah, that's it. Kiss me. Come on. I said kiss me. Baby, give me some sugar. Let's see at the mother. Oh, I'ma tell you. So, man, you alright?
So for those of you who are not familiar with the scene that I just showed, that's from the film Antoine Fisher. With starring Derek Luke and Denzel Washington. And for those of you who didn't know, it's based on a true story. There is a real Antoine Fisher. Who was under the care of a caregiver. And as we've seen depicted here in this scene, left in another care of another teenager or young woman. And then the physical and the mental and the sexual abuse that occurred to him, as we see he's depicted here, about 8 or 9 years old, maybe 9 years old. If you watch the movie Antoine Fisher, he's a young man who's troubled. He's entering the military. He fights at the drop of a hat. You rub him the wrong way. You brush by him. You step on his shoe. You bump him. You get to the seat that he wanted to get to. And you just happen to sit there and you're just sitting down. He's angry. He's the one that's always in the bar fighting. Fighting at the drop of a hat. Just angry. Every issue, every resolution, everything in him that deals with conflict resolution, he deals with it with anger and violence. And so then he's told, we're going to dismiss you from the military if you don't seek some help. Again, going back, Black men, we need mental health. We need mental health treatment. There's nothing wrong with it if that's what you need. Don't be afraid of it. So Antoine Fisher has to go. Derek Luke is playing the character. Antoine Fisher is a real person. He has to go see Denzel Washington, who's the military psychologist, to explain and get to the bottom of why he has these anger issues. And we see this troubled young man that not only it's affecting his military career and the things that he wants to do in life, but there's also a young Black girl who he's involved in the movie, and their relationship is strained. She likes him. He knows it. He likes her. But just being in a situation with being intimate with the young woman in a way that he respects and values her, he struggles with that. Why? Why? Because of the scene we just watched. Because of the abuse that he endured, the sexual abuse that he endured as a young Black child that no one ever addressed, that he held in his whole entire life. No way, no avenue, not ever being taught how to express that hurt and that pain. And so it always came out in physical violence towards those who were close to him, towards those who didn't even know. His first reaction was to be violent. Why? That's the effect, but why? And it's not until in the film that he's talking to a professional, Denzel Washington, that he understands now that the trauma that he went through as a young boy has affected him his whole entire life. It's hindered him in his relationship with a beautiful young black sister, that now he's verbally abusive towards her. And now that he can't deal with people surrounding him, even his own family, he has issues with abandonment issues, even with his own mother. Why you don't want me? Why did you leave me in this situation? Do you know what I went through? That's a story that happened with Antoine Fisher that's more common than what we know as even observed among our black men and black boys in our communities today. As I started earlier, I can find so much information on these type of situations that involve our young sisters and how they're traumatized, sexually abused at young ages, and we must support them and protect them. But as I began to research, what about young black blood? Is the information is almost none to non-existent. That's an issue. That's an issue. That's an issue. So while we're looking at the cause of why these young black men in our communities are so rageful, why? Not simply saying this is the only thing that affects them, but it's there. And people find it easier to look the other way. Why? Because it's harder. It takes more pouring into dealing with the cause of a situation than dealing with the effects of it. And that's all we address. So you're only identified by your behavior. Let me get this in here. You're only identified by your behavior. You're only identified by the acting out. And that's what's being prosecuted. R.Kelly is being prosecuted, and rightfully so, for the acts that he perpetrated. Right? The effects of what his brother testified, what his brother's been espousing, saying, listen, we were abused. We were abused at young ages. And no one, he's been espousing that for years. He's been espousing that for years. But because we have this aversion, we have this stereotype of how sexuality and over-sexuality of black boys are dismissed or sometimes looked at as badges of honor, versus then how we look at those things when it comes to our black sisters and little black girls and little brown girls, that those things are not taken to a degree where we see the cause and the effect of what's going on with this abuse that's running rapid in the black community among our black boys. And when black men talk about trauma, they're looked at as weak. They're looked at as weak. Right? So I want to share something else. Going to share something else. Let's talk about it. This is from Ebony. Still an African-American controlled news media. And this is from January 9, 2019. It says R. Kelly's brother says he and singer were molested by older sister. Carrie Kelly, R. Kelly, and I were molested by our older sister, Teresa. Carrie Kelly, who was featured in recent Lifetime docuseries Survivor R. Kelly, is the younger brother of the R&B singer. During the series, it was revealed that both Carrie and the My Body's Calling crooner were molested as children, though they didn't reveal their abuser. But during an interview with Tasha K, y'all know who she is, Tasha K of Unwind with Tasha, Carrie opened up about their molestation, saying their older sister, Teresa Kelly, sexually abused Carrie and Robert when she was 16. And they were 6, and R. Kelly was 10 years old. Can we for a brief moment, understand what happens to a 10-year-old boy when he's sexually molested and raped by someone who's supposed to be protecting of him, by someone who this should have never occurred with, someone whose care he was left in to protect him betrayed the innocence of a 10-year-old boy. I'm not giving excuses for what R. Kelly has done. I'm telling you, we have to deal with the causes so that we don't have more R. Kellys in our community. Because if someone would have addressed this situation when R. Kelly was going through this at 10 years old, the young women that became his victims, the victim creating victims, that the girls that became his victims, we could have saved them from that trauma. Some that will never recover from it. We could have done something. Something could have been done to save those girls who are now young women today and still are exhibiting the effects of the victimization that they received through R. Kelly, by R. Kelly. But if someone would have opened their eyes, if someone would have been able to see what this young boy at 10 years of age was going through, the deadening, the destruction of the innocence of a 10-year-old boy, creating this callousness towards young women, creating this cold heart towards young women, this monster, this Frankenstein that's being created right in our communities. Right in our communities. How many 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds, young black boys and young brown boys are in our communities today that are experiencing these same things, suffering in silence? These monsters that are being formulated in our communities. They walk to school every day with your daughters and your sons and your nieces and your nephews. They sit next to them every day in the classroom, suffering in silence, transforming them from innocent children to predators, sexual predators, deviant. And the only thing that we can say, well, they're grown now. To hell with them. We have to stop it, family. It's childish and immature to not look at the cause of these things in our communities. It's evil to not do it. Teresa Kelly sexually abused Carrie and Robert when she was 16 and they were 6 and 10. Respectfully, Kerry said his sister grabbed his head as a child and forced him to perform sexual favors. A 6-year-old. A 6-year-old. A 6-year-old. What does that do to a 6-year-old boy being forced to perform oral sex? On someone who's been left, they've been left in their care. Kerry also said Teresa allowed eldest brother Bruce to play outside when he wanted. Kerry and Robert, however, were forced to stay inside. So in other words, this was predatory. This was a scheme. They were forced to stay inside with her one at a time strategically, as we saw him say with his own words in the interview that I showed, so that she could sexually abuse them. While Kerry wasn't present when Robert was abused, he believes Robert experienced the same molestation. The difference, however, is that he believes the future R&B star enjoyed it, and that's usually what happens. We heard the same thing from Lil Wayne when he says, Birdman forced me at 11 years old to have a sexual encounter with a young lady. I was a virgin at 11 years old. And then Lil Wayne says, I enjoyed that shit. I enjoyed it. You're 11. You're 10. How do you know what the true enjoyment of sex is? At that age, sex now has been perverted. That's a trauma. That in all of this, no one wants to address, bring to the forefront and spotlight it. And the reason why it's important, because these monsters, these sexual predators, these abusers, and this is what they become when they're abused at these ages and these things aren't addressed. They become predators and abusers and little monsters in the community. They become rapers and murderers and thieves. They act out in ways that we don't understand. And we simply say it has to just be that the seed of the black man is evil. That what's in you, black man, whatever comes out of you is evil. No, that's a coward's understanding. That's a novice understanding. That's an ignorant approach to a real life trauma, to a real crime that's being perpetrated against young black boys and young black girls. But we're talking about our young black boys. It's the coward that says, let's just deal with the effect and dismiss it. This is how we deal with the effect. Abort it. But you cowards, you run because you won't deal with the cause. Listen to what he says. He says, Robert, I believe, mentioned it to Bruce, our older brother, and I overheard it. He was bragging about, I'm not a virgin no more. For him, it was like a rush. I think he enjoyed it, and I think that's another reason they got along after the fact. So now you see a 16-year-old is grooming a 10-year-old to enjoy having sex with her. That's a crime, people. That's a travesty. And we're talking about R.Kelly. But look. Let's hear it again. Let's hear it again.
Going on between Wayne and Birdman. They've famously been seen kissing in public.
Let's hear it again.
In fact, the Carter 3 has always been my favourite CD, but unfortunately, recently I did lose it after leaving it at the bathroom at the Notre Dame Cathedral. Wheezy has had a long and fruitful career, dropping 12 albums, winning 5 Grammys, and sleeping with so many women, I can only assume he's caught as many STDs as Ash Ketchum has caught Pokemon. Legend has it Wayne has slept with thousands of women, which is understandable considering the fact that he calls himself the Pussy Monster and released a song saying he wanted to bang every girl in the world. Those lyrics probably should have come with a disclaimer saying every girl in the world over 18.
How old are you, baby? Oh no, put her back. Put her back.
So it's safe to assume that Lil Wayne has one of the highest libidos in hip-hop, despite what his lackluster threesome sex tape video would have you believe. But the glamour of Lil Wayne's love life was punctured in 2009 when a clip from his unauthorized Carter documentary released, showing him telling a story recounting his first time having sex at age 11.
I was fucking at 11.
But what's interesting about this clip is the role that Birdman seems to play in instigating a seemingly illegal and abusive sexual encounter for the preteen Wayne.
I'm gonna do you like baby them did me. Yeah.
Y'all hear that? At 11. And he's saying it as if he knew he should be enjoying it at 11. This is what R.Kelly's brother is saying. These are the same things that occurred. And so then when we hear Wayne saying he slept with thousands upon thousands of women, do y'all understand the psychosis that goes into that? Can't possibly value women if he only sees them as objects of sexual pleasure. But this is formulated, this is created in him at 11 by an adult that should have been caring, should have been protecting him. Same thing we read about R. Kelly and his sister. She should have been protecting him at 10 years of age. But both of them are taking advantage. And look, they're both were similar in ages that these things occurred. Lil Wayne said I was 11. Carrie Kelly said Robert Kelly was abused at the age of 10 by his older sister. And as we go through these stories, we start to see these patterns, people. We looked at the clip of Antoine Fisher. He gives his own depiction of the story in his recount. He's about the same age. 9, 10 years old, maybe 11, when he's experienced sexual abuse by the hand of a female caregiver. This is what I'm talking about, people. It's destructive to only look at the effects of something and not the cause of it. I got something else I want to share with you guys. Let me show you this. Show my screen again. Let me put this on presentation mode, not slideshow. Oh, yeah. Let's deal with some of these. Let's deal with this. Sexual predators are made, they're not born. And we have to address this properly. Sexual predators in the shadows. This is an article, a newspaper clip, actually a newspaper, I'm sorry, a news report about India Kirksey, an African-American woman who's accused of raping a 4-year-old and then presenting it on the internet, right? Let's listen to the story a little bit.
Price Hill woman is arrested and accused of raping a 4-year-old at her West Price Hill home. Now the family of 20-year-old India Kirksey is coming to her defense. 9 on Your Side reporter TJ Parker spoke with them today and has their story.
Now wait. She's accused of raping a 4-year-old child, but now her family is coming to her defense. Why is that, people? Why is that? Let's continue.
From West Price Hill.
It's just not of her character. There's not nothing that she would do.
This family member who didn't want to be identified on camera tells 9 on Your Side this woman, India Kirksey, has special needs. Despite that, though, she agrees what Kirksey is accused of doing was wrong.
I know she's being portrayed as a monster. Anytime there's someone saying that someone is being some type of sexual attack on anyone, I automatically would think someone is a monster too, but literally anyone around you would know this is really not her.
So here you have a family member who chooses to not be identified for more reasons than I can only imagine. But she says something really intriguing here, that although she's guilty of this and people who do this should be looked at as monsters and predators, but this is not her character. This is not in her character to do this. She has special needs. If you go into the R.Kelly story, he was also diagnosed as a special needs. He had a learning disability. And still to this day. So here we have people who are clearly predators, especially this young woman here who's accused of raping a 4-year-old, right? Is this a greater monster than R.Kelly? See, that's the childish comparisons that oftentimes we hear when we start to say sexual abuse in our community is happening. People start comparing. Well, what about this? Well, what about the people that abuse and haven't gone through this? You don't know what people have gone through. No one wakes up and flips on a switch and become a predator, a sexual predator. There's something that's within them that caused that seed to grow. And what you're seeing is the outward acts, is the outward manifestation of that seed that was planted in them. Here you have the family member saying this woman who raped this 4-year-old, this African-American woman, India Kirksey, who raped this 4-year-old child, that it's not in her character. It's not in her character. I'm saying let's have the honest conversation, people. Are there simply predators out here? Black men and black women. This woman rapes a 4-year-old, not a 14-year-old, not that that's even better, but a 4-year-old. If you can ask yourself what would go through the mind of R.Kelly to rape or a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 17-year-old to victimize people of that age, what would be going through his mind? If you can ask yourself that question, ask yourself the question, what would be going through the mind of a young woman who rapes a 4-year-old? It's a mental health issue, people. We're demonizing people over mental health issues and trauma that they've experienced in their lives. Let's continue.
And Family Services tell us they were tipped off by someone in Texas who saw a video of Kirksey performing a sex act on a 4-year-old. Police arrested her yesterday. They say Kirksey admitted to them she did this.
We, as family, try the best we can to therapy and talk to her about stuff and her safety. And sometimes you can only do so much.
Now, Kirksey is ordered not to have any contact with that child. Her bond is set at $350,000. Reporting downtown, I'm TJ Parker, 9 on your side.
Caviezel woman is arrested.
And listen, now she's told she can't have any contact with this child. So this tells me that this is a child that's living in her home, or that she has access to, and has had access to possibly. And what she does is, and you have to address the mental health issue that's involved here, because she not only performs a sex act on a 4-year-old, she puts it on social media. She records it on social media. There's a mental health issue here we have to address. This is what I mean about dealing with the causes. The mental health issue that's rampant and not looked at in the Black community on both men and inside of men, both men and women, is out of control. And when mental health issues go unchecked, the effects of it are disastrous. The effects of it are deadly. But we have to address the mental health in our communities. We have to do that, people. Let's go a little bit further. Sexual predators in the shadows. Here's another example of a woman accused of raping 2 boys. Watch this. Listen to this, family. This is what I mean. I'm talking about protecting our children and not creating more sexual predators.
A Coleraine Township woman is in jail tonight, accused of raping 2 young boys who she babysat over a decade ago. 9 News reporter Tom McKee is live with how this case came to light. Tom?
Well, Caroline told a relative of these 2 men, who are now 18 and 23, came to police to say that Barbara Brooks had sexually assaulted them between 2000 and 2003.
Now listen, this case only comes to light because these 2 young boys, and they're no longer young boys, they're men now. The oldest is 23. These are young men now who are in our communities, who've been walking around for over a decade, almost, dealing with this, carrying around this secret of sexual trauma, rape, and abuse from the hands of a trusted caregiver. They've been walking around in this community, dealing with your daughters, dealing with your aunts, dealing with your nieces, and sometimes they're dealing with your nephews, they're dealing with your uncles, they're dealing with your brothers, because now they've developed a complete aversion to dealing with women because of the sexual trauma that they receive from women. Then now they prefer men. They go into a lifestyle of homosexuality because they're dealing with these traumas that they've received from women in the community. But now this only comes to light because these men are now of age, and they're tired. They can no longer bottle up this pressure and this frustration and this pain of dealing with the sexual trauma that has befallen them, no fault to their own. Imagine the possible relationships that they've been in, that they've affected someone adversely because they've had to deal with this.
It allegedly occurred as she babysat them at an apartment in Mount Healthy. Now, Brooks herself is in the Hamilton County Justice Center tonight as authorities try to sort out exactly what happened. Now, it was 2 counts of rape that are the charges that brought the 62-year-old Brooks to Hamilton County Municipal Court Friday morning. She lives on Niagara Drive in Coleraine Township and was arrested yesterday by the Cincinnati Police Fugitive Squad. The victims in question are listed in court documents by their initials as SSR, and the other is called DS. Brooks' attorney said her client suffers from
Now listen, one young man was born in 1988. Another young man was born in 1993. These are young people. Young people. Young people. That are carrying around this weight, this trauma of sexual abuse, this shame.
and asked for an OR bond, but prosecutors disagreed.
One child was 12 to 15 during that period, and the other was 7 to 9. I don't see the extra flag. I don't see in here the fact that she's a female.
She denies all of these allegations, and we would ask Your Honor to consider setting OR bond or the alternative EMD so she can continue her treatments at home.
And listen, she's a babysitter in the community. She has been for years. Do we even know? And I'm trying to get further in the story a little bit, but do we even know how many young men that actually have come through her care and at what ages they've actually come through her care? Are we safe to assume that they weren't victimized by her sexual advances, that they weren't preyed on as well sexually, that they weren't raped and molested as well, as these 2 men had the courage enough to come forward? How many hundreds, tens or hundreds of children have passed through her hands and her care in decades? Here, she's in her 60s. The alleged abuse of these 2 boys occurred maybe a decade prior to that. So she was in her 50s, maybe late 40s. We don't know how many young men or even young girls that she's probably abused. These are just the 2 that came forward. But these are men that are out in the society carrying this trauma that no one wants to deal with. And I see you. I see you. A Columbus woman accused of raping 3 boys under the age of 12. Amarita Griffey, let's talk about it.
At 6, a Columbus woman is facing charges tonight after reportedly confessing to performing a sex act on 3 young boys. Amarita Griffey was arraigned in court today on 3 counts of rape involving a child under the age of 13. NBC4's Ted Hart is live tonight at Columbus Police Headquarters with a closer look at this disturbing case. Ted?
Colleen, neighbors say that Rita Griffey has always kind of gravitated toward the children in their Southwest Columbus neighborhood. A bit odd, they thought, but not a problem. Never a problem, really. Now, though, things have changed.
I want to ask this. If she was a man and the community knew that they were always gravitating towards children and it seemed a bit odd to them, would not this man probably have been referred to as a possible pedophile already, or referred to as a possible person who's a possible child molester? Had this been a man in the community that everybody saw that always was hanging around children more than adults, like they observed this young woman doing? This is what I mean about the stereotypes and the stigma when it comes to child sexual abuse and the predators I showed this even earlier when I showed the white women sexual predators who were mostly school teachers involved in underage sex and molestation of children in the schools. The initial response that I received in the chat was, "Hey, look, see, yeah, that's what white women do. They do it more than black women." The issue is not whether or not they do it more than black women. The issue, the proper thing would be is that it occurs, that it happens to children. But immediately it goes to, you see, white women do it more than black folks. Well, you're not really engaged in the white community like that, are you? We're talking about what's going on in your community. Where is the responsiveness and the outrage of that? It's silent in the chat. It's silent in the chat.
Police say Amarita Griffey has admitted that she engaged in sexual activity with 3 young boys.
Range from the age of 10 to 11.
She's facing 3 counts.
There that age is again, 10 to 11. We saw it with Lil Wayne. We saw it with R.Kelly. We saw it with the previous young lady, lady we just showed. That same age group. Here it is, 10 to 11 again.
Of rape of a child under the age of 13. Neighbors say Griffey lives with her brother and grandmother. Neighbors say Griffey has always seemed a bit childlike.
Just wanting to be around kids and be social. I mean, she's very sociable, very, very caring person. She'd always come over and hang out with the kids and my neighbor.
Coons says she never felt as though the children were at risk around Griffey, but that Griffey had changed recently.
When those other kids started coming around, it was like she was a totally different person.
Jessica Coons says it was May 21st when Amarita Griffey was spotted in the backyard of her home with the 3 neighborhood boys, 1 10 and 2 11-year-olds. Coons believes Griffey saw the boys as her peers and felt pressure to do what they asked.
I feel like they really influenced Rita to do something that she didn't want to do.
Now here, this is the part I wanted to get to. You see how now you have another adult blaming the 10 and 11-year-old children for the acts of the adult. This is insane, people. This is what I mean about how we look at female predators, sexual predators in this country and in this community. As somehow, because these are boys, and this is the same thing that we hear with this whole retarded hashtag abort crowd that says, blame it on the children, blame it on the male seed. They're the problem. That's the issue. Here, she just literally blamed 3 10 and 11-year-old boys for their victimization, for their rape and molestation by an adult. She believes that the 10 and 11-year-old pressured the adult to do something that was so horrific that she would have sex with these underage children. She blamed the children. The effects, people. Dealing simply with the effects and not the causes. There's a sickness among you people. There's a sickness among you people. Here we are again. Let's see. Let's see if I can get that one. Let's see here. Let me go back. And let's look at this one. Let's look at this one. It's a sickness here, people.
And a jury is now deciding the fate of a woman accused of sexually abusing 2 children. But after 5 days of graphic, emotional, and conflicting testimony and more than a dozen witnesses, the trial of Juanita Fisher is now in the hands of a jury.
It comes to a close without Fisher taking the stand. Ann Bowden has been covering the story from its beginning. She joins us now with what happened today. Ann?
Well, Rick and Vicky, the defense decided not to put Juanita Fisher on the stand at the last minute, but they said they made that decision because they already had a taped, emotional, tearful interview from Juanita Fisher that they showed the jury when she was interviewed by a police detective here in Clark County. When they presented that to the jury, they believed that they had showed their evidence concerning Juanita Fisher. Now, the prosecution believes they have presented a solid case, but the defense says their case is solid because they presented reasonable doubt.
I do feel like we have gotten our evidence out and look forward to the jury receiving it.
34-year-old Juanita Fisher is accused of sexually abusing a 10-year-old male relative 7 years ago.
There we go again. There's that age. There's that age. Even though we should look at all of our young boys and young men to protect them at all ages, start paying attention to your sons around that age, your nieces, your nephews. Start your grandchildren. Start paying attention to around little boys that are around that age, between 9, 10, and 11 years old, because we're clearly starting to see that this is where this sexual abuse usually occurs. Just by observing the information we've talked about today, this is where this sexual abuse usually occurs among young men at around this age, around 9, 10, and 11 years old. This is usually their first encounters from the information that we've been gleaning today. That same age, we have to start dealing with the causes and not just the effects.
And then forcing him to have sex with a female relative of the same age while she watched. Tuesday, the defense began with its star witness to try and prove it's all a lie. Defense testimony began with the boy's ex-girlfriend.
We think that is pretty powerful. And
On Friday, the defense showed the jury Facebook postings between the alleged female juvenile victim in the case and the girlfriend. The Facebook postings occurred after the alleged molestation, and they plainly state both knew the boy had made up the entire story to get back at Fisher for forbidding him to see the girlfriend. Post by post, the girlfriend read the exchange on the stand. What he said ain't true. You know why he did it, right? He wasn't allowed to see me because of her. I don't know why he would do that over a girl, but he did. Now, early on, the prosecution asked the judge to throw out the postings, but the judge denied it.
First of all, she did not know whether or not those were complete Facebook listings.
this is a young lady who has no reason today to lie about that. In fact, you would think at most she might be angry at the former boyfriend or something.
And so now we hear in the story now that now the alleged victims now their whole story has to be taken and looked at it as if it may have never happened or if they made the whole thing up. And we often hear this when it comes to victims of a young age in sexual abuse cases, where there's always this question of whether or not they made it up, or whether or not these 10-year-olds created these elaborate stories of sexual abuse simply because they wanted to victimize someone else. Again, 10 years old dealing with 34-year-old. So even in the sense of the predators and how we see these things play out, how predators, female predators are viewed, even in this country, female sexual predators are even viewed in this country and in our communities. You clearly see something completely different, especially when it comes to the male sexual predators. We have to look at both sides of this, because it's usually the male sexual predators that's preying on or engaging the females, but it's the female sexual predators that's usually engaging the males, the little black and brown boys. And it's their behavior of the little black and brown boys that everyone wants to highlight as if they're just these monsters. But because the Frankensteins, the Dr. Frankensteins of these black male monsters are female, then there's a degree of questionability of whether or not it should even be taken seriously, because these are simply boys dealing with sex at a young age. Where oftentimes it's worn as a badge of honor instead of realizing and understanding what it is, and as sexual victimization and over-sexualization of boys. This is exactly the things that we have to address. Is nothing is all the call. What we see with our black man today is not just one cause. You just can't say, yeah, it's just them. There's a part that's being played. There's a part that's being played. And all of it must be considered. But we have this fracturing in our community that pits one group against another group, and no one's being healed from it. No one's being healed from it. So I'm going to play something. And again, I'm going to be invoking the Freedom of Information Act. I'm going to be sharing some audio. I'm going to be sharing some audio. Because I just recently heard some very disturbing exchanges that goes into the very thing that we're talking about, on how we look at victimization of our young black boys. And when we talk about trauma, how people in the black community are so easily dismissive of it. They're so easily dismissive of it. I'm going to share this audio. Going to share this audio. And so let me tell you what we get ready to hear. I'm about to play a recording, an audio recording from the Taz exclusive channel. And there's a panel of women that are having a conversation. And there's a guest that comes on to the panel. They allow him to come onto the panel. It's a 19-year-old African-American young man. And he's clearly looking for answers. And I will say Taz is not hosting he's not on the panel at this time. So this is not towards him, but this is the discussion that's happening on the panel. And so what happens is that this young man comes on and he's been listening to the conversation and he wants some answers. And he's hoping that the women on the panel can give him some direction and some insight. He's really looking for some wisdom and some guidance. And instead, what he gets overall, not from the entirety of the panel, but instead what he gets overall is virtually an attack where he's told simply because you're a young black male, you're worthless anyway. And so your future is not bright anyway because you're a young black man and you don't know much. So the things that you're coming on here saying that you worry about really doesn't mean anything because you really ain't got no future anyway. And somebody should have aborted you, 19 years ago. That's kind of how the conversation was working. I will say there was one young lady on the panel that was really trying to say, hey, look, let's listen to what he has to say, right? But the moment he says he's received trauma from black women growing up in his life, or young black girls growing up in his life, he's attacked, right? So let's listen to this. I hope you can hear it. Let me turn the volume up a little bit. Let's see if we can hear this here.
That time. So let's give you, so you got more research. Google is your friend. Go ahead. I feel hold on one second. I feel a little different because I hate when men, young or old, come on here and they say stuff like, oh, this gender war. What women are doing are responding and finally speaking up for themselves. When it was just men, like Tony Sotomayor and them, no one ever got online and said, oh, I'm tired of this gender war or anything. Once black women started responding, then all of a sudden now everybody wants to throw in the white flag and, oh, let's all stop this and come together. No, we never have. But it's different for him. Sweetheart, it's different for him because he's 19. That's fine. Let's hear what he has to say. But hold on, but that's fine. He's not got to understand that. But you also said that he's the future. So we have to correct them instead of speaking with them. So no, I'm not saying we agree with him. I'm saying that the gender war is shitty, sis. We know that the gender war is shitty. Absolutely. He doesn't like it. I don't like it. You don't like it. But we have to kind of listen to him because he's going to be the one that he's going to be in that group of people that's going to lead this shit going forward. So all I'm saying is that we need to probably listen to him as a black man, a young black man, to see what he has to say. Let's hear what he has to say. And if we can drag. We can drag. But let's see. I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that, and I'll mute up. But I think we've listened to black men way too long. And that's why we're in the predicament that we're in now. If anything, he needs to listen to us.
Hold on. Now, he's 19 years old. You mean to tell me that you're in such a place of disparity that you don't have enough patience and enough wisdom and enough guidance to listen to a 19-year-old who's come on the panel very respectively, who's simply saying, I'm looking for answers. He's saying, I'm no longer taking the sides of black men. I'm not longer taking the sides of black women. I'm tired of the fighting. I'm tired of the infighting in my community. I want to see something done. I don't want to live in this space anymore as a young black man, having to feel like I have to choose sides between black men and black women in my community and you can't give him the space to simply listen to him, that's toxic. That's toxic. Now you've clearly shown us that you're a part of the problem when you can't even listen to the young man. And shout out to the sister that was trying to bring some type of understanding. At least let's hear him so that we can move forward in the space and deal with these issues in our community. But even she's attacked, and the vitriol of the young man as he's sitting there waiting patiently to be talked to and to be given wisdom, to hear from Sophia, to be enlightened by the nurturers, the Black women. And he's told that what he has to say doesn't matter. We've listened to you. We've listened to your kind way too long. He's 19. What the hell has he ever done to you? Let's continue.
Excuse me for 1 second. Hello, excuse me for 1 second. I just want to say something really quick. When you were on the slide before you came up, sir. Can y'all hear me? Yep, we hear you. Yes. Okay, I just want to say this one thing. How long were you on this slide before you came up? I don't think Dix and Bros can hear me. Let me, Are you there, sir? Come out. Got a question. How long were you on this slide before you came up? Listen. Don't tell her. Just give me 1 second. I said about an hour. Lips and Bros, hold on a second. That's okay. That's okay if she can't hear me. Y'all can go ahead. I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is shitty. I'm sorry if I'm talking when I'm not supposed to be. Let me mute up. Tell her to go ahead. She said go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. She can't hear us. Hello? No, I just wanted to, I'll go ahead and talk since she's off or whatever. I just want to say this. I know people are saying that she's coddling because she's having a conversation. I think that it would be prudent if we learn the difference between coddling and being able to have a conversation. So it definitely depends on where you are mentally within the situation or whatever. But you're also I was saying something. Yeah, let me finish. So at 19, I don't think he's responsible for what's wrong with the community. So I see where Lips is coming from.
Can I just want to finish this because I do have like a lot of shit like to say, and it's like a lot of ideas and shit.
Go ahead.
So yeah, like, hello.
Did you hear me talking in this talk? Did you hear me talking?
No, you was on mute the whole time.
Okay, so it's just something wrong.
I can hear it just fine.
Everybody can't hear me though.
I can hear her.
So let me add something real quick. Okay, 19-year-old Ballard, is that what you like me to call you? What do you want me to call you?
19. Okay. Baller. Yeah.
Okay. No problem. Okay. I'll just tell you. Okay, I'll just tell you straightforwardly. The men started it. And the reason why the men started is because men are very competitive. So we all know that men have a competitive energy.
So let me pause it right there. Now I will say this. I believe that was Nyla that was speaking a little while ago, and she was saying, listen, there's no reason to put blame on this 19-year-old. He's not a part of the problem that she personally addresses, right? And so I agree with her with that. So this is not a slight towards her. What I'm saying is listen to the exchange among the other women on the panel, right? And then Ellipsis, she's also saying, let's listen to this gentleman. So you do have women here that are trying to be respectful of the fact that you have a 19-year-old man who's coming on the panel who's trying to address himself, but then you have this vitriol, right? And then you have this person that comes on and said, listen, the problem is the men. They're competitive, right? And so, again, it's this still widening of the gap. And what he's asking for is, can you show me the bridge? Can you show me how we pull this thing together? Can you show me the possibility or the hope for unity? And what we're hearing is this hopelessness that's being given to this 19-year-old man. So if all you have to give a 19-year-old is hopelessness, and there's no prospect of prosperity and hope and unity for the future of Black men and Black women in this country, if that's what you're willing to give to him, then what do you expect his actions or his actions towards you to be like? What positive impartation can you give? And this is what I mean about people speaking to others who are not qualified, because all they're doing is speaking out of their hurt and pain. No objectivity. Let's continue.
I just kind of want him, is it okay? Can we just let him speak without asking him questions first? Can we just let him speak first? Because we haven't gotten a solid, complete thought out of this gentleman yet. Can we just let him speak first? It's not coddling. I just want to hear a 19-year-old's mindset in today's society. Can we do that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say this real quick though. So I'm going to say this because I'll be honest with you. I enjoy hearing you talk, but you talk a lot. So let me just say this to him really quick, okay? I just wanted him to let him know that men started because men are very competitive. We know that they're competitive naturally.
But I want to let him speak first. Can we let him speak first?
Okay.
Let's let him speak first. I just really want to hear what he has to say.
Okay.
I'm not coddling this gentleman. I just want to hear what he has to say. We all have had a lot to say over the past hour or hours. Let's just hear from the next generation. I just want to hear from him. That's it. So we can support ourselves and for him.
All right, so growing up, like, I've just been, observing the community because, the Black community is kind of my environment, so, like, as far as, like, experiences goes, I've experienced, like, trauma from both sides, from, like, both genders, from male and female. So, like as a community, man, like, just over the years, man, I've just seen, like, the community just, like, fucking split and shit. And so, with me doing my research, man, like, I mean, I've had my moments where, like, I've chose, like, one side of the gender and shit. Like, there's been moments where, like, I would, like, choose to be on one gender's side and shit because the other gender, you feel me, is, like, on some fuck shit, right? Like, I would choose, like, Black women's side at one point. And then, like, I would fuck around and black women would do some shit and I would be on, like, Black men's side on some other shit. And then I would just find myself hopping, like, both sides. I'm like, bro, what the fuck? Like, why not just be neutral about it and be like, both motherfuckers are just fucked up in the head? Like, there's, like, a whole mental health crisis in the entire fucking community. It's like, I've gotten to a point where I'm like, it's not even just Black women or Black men. It's, like, the whole fucking community. It's like, why can't we just, at some point, like, fucking just come together and realize that this is a whole group thing? Like the whole fucking, I don't know, man. It's like, ain't no way, you feel me, just one gender is responsible for the whole community's fuck up. It's like, I feel like just both of us, I don't know, man. It's like, really, it just angered me growing up in Chicago, because I live in Chicago, and, like, I've seen, like, it just fucking angered me to see how we just, like, killing each other and shit. And it's like, at one point, dude, I've just grown almost like a resentment to my own fucking race sometimes. Like, I grew out of it, right? Because, I learned the value of forgiveness and shit. But, like, just growing up, seeing, like, like Chicago and shit, and, like, everybody just smoking each other and shit, bro. It's like, bro, ain't no fucking way, bro. Like, I just see both genders just I don't know if it's a mental health crisis or some shit, but, like, I just feel like it starts somewhere in the fucking mind, bro. Like, I feel like we need some sort of, like, self-improvement. Like, the younger generation needs to, like, value, like, self-improvement. Just trying to be a fucking decent individual and, you know, just helping the community and shit, you feel me? Like, this whole fucking, we gotta divide, and there's this one group versus the other group and shit. I've fell in that trap before, like, at one point where I'm like, yo, fuck them, I'm finna come with them and then come stay with this community because that community is fucked up. Like, nah, I don't like this community. I'm finna go to this community. Just finding myself identifying, just switching fucking sides and shit. And it's just weird as fuck, bro. And just growing up, it just confused me.
It's too far gone. Can I ask you a question? Let me say this right quick.
Hold on a minute, ladies.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? In regards to, you said earlier that you did some research. What kind of research was it that you was doing, and what was it that you found out from that research?
Google, YouTube, and some articles and shit, just going over shit.
And you say going over?
Yeah, a lot of.
Can you be more specific?
Ladies, this is what I want to say. Hold on. Before we get on here,
Sure,
I want to say this. Ladies.
Lips, he was
I want to say this before we get on here and say anything about what you
I'm not getting on him.
I understand, but I'm jumping in because I want to say this. Listen, you can, oh my God, all you want to, but I want to say this. This is the thing. The reason why I want to hear him, because guess what? You have nieces. You have young cousins. You have young people that look up to you. And this man is a part of that next generation. We need to hear the mindset of this next generation. Because I don't know about y'all. I got 3 nieces, okay, that are babies that will be growing up dealing with what's going on after you and I get old and do whatever the hell we're going to do and transition and go wherever the hell we're getting ready to go. I need to understand and hear the mindset of what this man is talking about, so I know how to better educate. We were hearing him. My legacy. We were hearing him.
Ladies.
I'm just saying this. Wait. Let me get it out. You can listen. Y'all have all the people listen. Let me get it out.
We understand what you're saying because we are also the mothers.
And I'm not.
Tina's a mother. Khadijah's
let me speak my
young woman. MJ's a mother. I'm a mother. We all want to understand what's going on with his brain. Yeah, we all want to understand his mindset. Yeah, the reason I'm asking the questions that I'm asking is to help him.
You can say whatever you want to say. Let me say what I want to say. Let me say what I want to say. This man is a reflection of his coming. He's not. Okay, you're repeating yourself. We heard you already.
Lips, I don't know if you can hear me. Lips, we understand what you're saying. I don't know if you can hear me with the Wi-Fi, but we understand what you're saying. We understand.
Listen, let me finish. Can I finish?
Lips, we understand. We all want to hear what's on his mind and the state of play. All I'm trying to do, listen, I've worked with young people for the last 25 years. I'm trying to understand, to bring him to the context of where his brain is.
So you're not going to let me speak my mind? You're not going to let me complete my thought? So this is not the complete my thought and let me say what I want to say before I mute up? You going to not let me speak my mind?
Continue.
Thank you. I appreciate that, ladies. Listen, everybody is not going to appreciate where I come from. And, you know, this might be that moment. And listen, I respect that. But what I'm saying is I have people in my family that are younger than me that I want to hear from people like them. And at the end of the day, this is what I want to hear. And this is what I want to know. Granted, we have 20, maybe 100 of different personalities that is outside of his mindset. But I want to hear what he has to say. And ladies, please teach him, educate him, let him know what he needs to know, give him the jewels, drop the information that you need to drop on him. I just want to let people know it's like how Taz was trying to inform us over the past couple of days. He was telling women to stand down off the panel and not say shit and let other men come up
so he can expose the nature of the dereliction of these men and what the fuck they coming with. Sometimes we have to listen to hear what we need to hear so we can move accordingly. Taz was telling ladies, shut up, let these men talk. They was not listening to him. Over the past 3 days, I've been on these live streams. They did not let these men talk. That stupid shit they was talking. She was trying to support. Cynthia does the same thing. She says, women don't call. I'm asking for the men to call because I want to show you something. This is a show you something moment. That's all I'm saying. I'm muting up.
Okay, I'm going to say this because what I had to say. So this is what I wanted to say to the 19-year-old woman. All right. Well, this is what I don't want to be cut off either because I don't cut off other people. So please stop talking. All right. So what I wanted to say to him is that men are very competitive, and when they're not working, especially when they're not either working or they're going to competitive. They're going to be competitive with the 19. So like in the 50s, I want to be cut off either. I'm not going to say that what we were doing is more important than what women do. So what I want to say is that
I can't hear you.
And Lips and Pros, can you mute up?
Lips, can you like
Lips, you're echoing. Really? I'm crazy. I'm drunk. Okay.
Can you mute yourself? Okay. So what I was saying is that men are competitive with women. Can you hear me now? 19-year-old is still echoing really bad. Oh, me? Yeah, that's not me. I think that's Gibbs. So men are very competitive, right? And sometimes they misplace that energy and they compete with their women, right? So like let's say the 50s, even white men competed with their women. What they did was they said that what the women did was not important. Women at home, they were having kids. You know, every human that you see walking around, a woman did that. But the men are going to say, oh, we built these buildings, we did this, we were the rioters, blah, blah, blah. So that in itself is competition. So that's why a lot of times you would see women want to go after their career.
So let me pause the conversation right here, man. So again, we have this 19-year-old man who's on the panel respectively, trying to get some answers and some wisdom on how he could exist in a place of unity. And the only thing that some of them have to say is that, Negro, you're the problem. Black men are the problem. And so again, he's 19. He's a young man. He's telling you he's been dealing with trauma from both black men and black women his entire life. He's been traumatized by both groups. And instead of trying to understand his trauma, what you get is more blame, more blame, more blame. This is what I mean about people who simply are speaking out of their hurt. That's your first indicator, because your first intrinsic response is to blame. When hurt people attempt to hurt other people, it only comes out in the form of blaming. I blame you, or I blame them. You're talking to this man about what occurred in the 50s and the 60s. He's 19 years old. So he was born maybe 2001, 2002? So you're telling him that for almost 40, 50 years, that neither black men nor black women have cared enough about his generation or the people coming after them to try to walk together in unity, but simply trying to tear down and destroy. That's what he's saying to you. He's sick and tired of it. He's tired of it. He hates his own. He's come to hate his own, hate his own race. Not because of black men and not because of black women, but because of both black men and black women who can't have a conversation with them on how to move forward without blaming. He even hates himself because of something that he's had no control over. He hates himself. He hates the own color of his skin. He doesn't want to identify with you. He doesn't want to exist with neither you, black man, or you, black woman. He don't want to identify with either one of you. It's a sickness, people. And this is what I mean about only dealing with the effects by putting a Band-Aid on a shotgun wound and it's become infected. And you think because you're addressing the wound that the black man has caused, your poor dressing of the wound or attempting to address it is just as effective because you're passing along the infection and the disease because you're unsanitary in your thinking. Your thinking is tainted. So your responses are tainted. And all you have to give this young man is blame, 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 blame. Hashtag abort, blame, blame. Hashtag abort, blame, blame. And then you have the men, see, black women ain't this. Y'all ain't that. You ain't this and you ain't that. I want me a white woman. I don't need a black woman. Black women are too this, black women are too that. You're all infected. You're all dying of disease and this sickness of hatred, and you're dying, you're killing your children. You're killing your future. And you wonder why you're at the bottom. Black woman, if black men are at the bottom, you're not far from it. Black man, if black women are at the bottom, you're not far from it. You can complain and blame all you want to, but this world, this society is not going to allow you to unravel yourself from who you are, black man and black woman. You can divest, you can attach yourself to whatever, you can be alone, you can choose to live your life out in obscurity. But the world is still going to see you who you are and for what you are.
Right? Because the men are trying to compete with them and say, hey, look, you're a woman. You should stay at home. You should have the kids, blah, blah, blah. What I'm doing is more important, right? So women want to feel important, too. The thing about women is we can do anything. We have kids. We can stay at home. We can work. We can do this. So where's that marinating? So I can marinate the lamb. Yeah, let it marinate. Yeah. I'm sorry. Keep talking. Oh, okay. All right, no problem. I'm marinating lambs right now. It's Christmas Day. So, okay. No problem. I'm sorry. I'm listening, ladies. Because I got something to say, but y'all keep on going. All right, thank you. No problem. Yep. So with the men, the men are just highly competitive, and it's funny because the men try to say that we compete with them now. So now that we're in the workplace, they say, "Oh, the women are competing with us." No, women are not competitive like that. We're not like that. Women actually like to give of themselves. That's why they give to their children. They're very selfless. So that's why I try to teach the women that I'm around. It's okay to be a little bit selfish, and we didn't start this. It's the men that started because they're the ones who are very competitive. So that is very true. That is very true. But one thing that hold on, Vicky. Let me say something. Let me say something.
So here's the thing. I think Black men have to understand gender roles. And even with the examples that you used, you kept saying the killings, the gang violence in Chicago. That's men doing that. That's not women. Nope. So I think you got to understand.
Again, more blaming. No solutions for this young man. No answers. Nothing viable. And then you're a fool if you think he doesn't see it. You're a fool. He's already told you. I've seen the destruction from both sides. He just told you that. I've seen the destructions from both black men and black women in my community, and I'm tired of both of y'all with y'all bullshit. He just told you that, but you won't listen. You can't listen because all you have to do and all you are capable of doing is speaking from a place of pain and hurt. And that's all you have. And I understand that. But you completely dismiss what this young man has said. He's already seen and heard the blame game. He knows who's doing most of the killings and gun violence. He knows that. But I guarantee you that was occurring when he was saying, I've still been victimized by black women. You're not listening you're not listening. You refuse to listen. And as they say, I refused. One said on the panel, I don't want to hear what he has to say. I don't care what he has to say. We've been listening to them too long. Hearing someone speak and listening is two different things. Hearing someone only leads to blame. Listening leads to solutions. And it's clearly that many of you in this exchange don't know how to listen because all you gave was blame. You only heard what he said. You're not listening to what he said.
And gender roles, and to know that if you're a man, you're the head. So if your community is in shambles, that's indicative of your leadership. And so if you don't like how your community looks, it's upon the men inside of that community to fix it. You understand? So there should never be a such thing as a gender divide because men are supposed to be the protectors of women. And so if you got Malcolm X in the 60s saying black women are the most unprotected, most disrespected 50-something years ago, what does that tell you? Things have not changed. So you have to understand your role in society as a man is to be the provider and the protector. And so you have to question why nobody in this world respects black men. No matter the gender, no matter the race, no matter the culture. That's indicative of your poor leadership and your manhood. And so what black men fail to realize is the moment that y'all get it together, you will get full cooperation out of your women. So I think they want to attack you, but that gender divide is because black men are afraid to attack the real enemy, so they go for the lesser threat.
Yes, they do. They go for the lesser sex. That's exactly what black men do. They can't get at white men their actual problem. So what they think they can do is they come to the black women because they talk shit. They talk about we do this, so but they can't come out literally the people that actually oppress them. That's what pisses me off about a lot of black males is because they want to fight us instead of everything else that's actually fucking them up. We had nothing to do with how you feel about white men. We had nothing to do with how you feel about yourself. We had nothing to do that you would rather beat up and kill a black woman
Oh my God! It's at this point, it's just like, to me, it's just like, it's ridiculous, because how the fuck are we as black women with our own black men the number one higher rape, higher killing, and higher everything else? How are we that? When our man's supposed to be black woman this and black woman that, we the backbone. How the hell are we at the lowest point in America? How? Can somebody answer that question? I really appreciate it. So to him, so when you say you see all those killings, who do you see killing? Or do you see black women out there shooting and killing in Chicago?
Nope. No, it's certainly the men doing that shit. I mean that's definitely honest. I mean, obvious, but really, yeah, I really don't have an argument against. Of course, women aren't going out doing the killings and shit. So I definitely don't have an argument against that.
Here's another thing. Vicky, you're gonna have to mute up. Here's another thing.
Put yourself on mute.
I won't talk no more. I'm sorry. I won't talk no more. Y'all go ahead and keep going.
It's not talking. You can hear the activity.
I do have another question though.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So dealing with let's deal with this whole misogyny shit. This whole because I know a lot of men out there just fucking resent women and shit, and I don't know. The theory goes like this, right? The theory goes like this, right? Young men or older men apparently have this resentment, and if you can explain this, because I still want to understand. Apparently, a lot of just men have a lot of resentment towards women and shit, because shit that you might even deem as silly and shit, right? Some shit that they dealt with in the past, they would have I guess female siblings and shit, or whether they're going into an environment where I guess apparently they're being bullied by women and shit, and I mean I couldn't help but to witness the shit and experience it, but what I did try to understand. I tried to come up with a reason to why that may be the case. I was thinking okay, maybe they have a resentment towards women because maybe they've experienced some sort of trauma at their younger years. Maybe.
Now, he's trying to get some understanding on why the black men around him, or some of the men that he addresses or deals with, that they have this resentment towards black women. And he's trying to understand, because he's saying that the black men are telling him, his peers are telling him, that they've experienced trauma at the hands of these women. Right? And so he's trying to get some clarity and some understanding as to why that is. Now, that's a legitimate question to ask. Now, this is the part where, again, we start to see where this young man at 19, and as Nyla said earlier when I played the audio, he's not responsible for this. He's not responsible for it. But that's all, none of that's even made a dent here into the degrees to where some still see him as having no value in even what he has to say when he says, I've experienced trauma. I've experienced trauma. They completely dismiss it. Just like we saw in the previous videos that I played, just like when we talk about the R.Kelly situation, no one deals with the trauma that these young men are saying that they're dealing with daily. Right? From both men and women. Right? This is never addressed to the degree where we hear it addressed with our Black women. We got to stop comparing the two and saying, look, our children are suffering. Our children, this young man has said, listen, I've been suffering in this space. And he's seeking help from those who should be able to help him.
The women that did that may have probably did it because men were responsible for mistreating them as well. If you know where I'm getting at. Like, if women were like...
Hold on a second, ladies. Can I ask the young man something? How long have you been around in this space in particular over the last? Because you said you'd been watching this for about an hour or so.
Today, yeah.
So in the last couple of weeks, month, let's say a month, what have you sort of seen from this space?
What have I seen from this space? Yeah, just more so you guys just addressing, I guess Black men's pathology and like the dysfunction that they cause and shit. And going after the manosphere and how they, they just have, so much hatred towards Black women and shit. You guys have been addressing that, and it kind of just changed. I know what really brought me. I think it was this YouTuber named C Boogie Productions and shit. He kind of was just going off on Black men and shit, and I guess he kind of just led me to here, cause I heard about his shit, and he was like, he was just going off on Black men, like saying Black men need to be held accountable and shit, and that kind of just gave me a new perspective. Because before I was like, because I didn't know any fucking better. I was actually watching like MGTOW content and shit, only for the self-improvement parts and shit, because I wanted to find. Hold on, my headphone. God. So I wanted to find direction at the time, and I was just searching for shit right on YouTube. So in 2019, I discovered him, and it was basically just just gave a new perspective, like, because hearing that shit from another Black man just kind of like, I don't know, it changed his mind at that point. It's like another Black man saying, no, Black man, you need to wake the fuck up. This is the shit that you're doing, and this is why women don't want your ass. You're an incel and shit. And after that, I was like, I agree with him. And he was all about self-improvement and shit. And I guess after a while, I discovered like Taz Exclusive and shit. And he was like, I've witnessed him go back, like, the Black men who, perpetuated the dysfunction and shit, Because again, before all of this shit, I was really watching content creators that had Black women for like their dysfunction and shit. And I was looking at their content. And I don't know, I just kind of just switched over and shit. And then sometimes I just found myself switching back and forth. And I've gotten to a point where I'm like, yo, I need to take a fucking neutral stance because I can't make up my mind for shit right now, bro. Because it looks like the whole fucking community is just like that. But
let me say this to you. Let me say this to you. There's a difference from Black men, they attack Black women. Black women like Cynthia G and Nyla, they talk about the pathology of Black men. You don't see them attacking their looks and all of those things. And I think you have to be aware of what you are dipping and dabbing and going from to pitiful understanding. Like this whole panel was about divestment. I came on here and I asked the women who were divested about divestment because I'm open to it, right? So as a young Black man, you should have when you seen C Boogie talking about it, that was your chance that you should have reached out to him or somebody like Taz, grown men in your community, and have a conversation with them or whatnot. But I think what the major problem is right now Because when you talked about the violence and Black men feeling like there being a, childhood trauma, you have to understand Black women went through childhood trauma as well. And if we can grow out of it and still love Black men and support them, that's not a valid excuse. I think what has happened is because Black men are such failures and because Black women are so successful, they have made Black women public enemy number one. And so you have to acknowledge that. You know what I'm saying? I think you definitely need to find people like Taz and have a conversation with men who are not sitting up talking about sex and bitches and hoes and drugs and gang violence. You understand what I'm saying?
Do you watch Cuba?
Now, again, I could agree with part and in part with what the sister said. But here's the issue. He says, I've experienced trauma from both Black men and Black women. Do y'all understand? He says, I've experienced trauma from both Black men and Black women. And the only thing that they have to give from the ones that we're speaking is still more blame of Black men, but never addressing the fact that he's saying, I experienced trauma from Black women. Why doesn't that register to you? That he's saying, I have an issue with the community as a whole. As a whole. Still more of the blame game. That's the only wisdom you have to give to the young man. And so we continue to see, again, he's telling you, look, we're going through trauma. We're experiencing trauma from both sides. From both sides. And we need help. I need help. I need direction. Black women are destroying us. Black men are destroying us. Where do we go? Where do we go? When the conversation gets back, if it was there before and it's not there, it needs to get back to the point where we have issues in our community and the blame game doesn't work. The blame game doesn't work. We have to deal with the causes. The causes is that there's a fracture of this unity among Black men and Black women in this community, and it's stagnated. Black men aren't going anywhere, and Black women, you're not going anywhere. And the proof is in the same recycled commentary and the same recycled blame that you've been espousing that's been occurred, as the sister said, this started in the 50s, in the 60s. Black women, you have no power without the Black man, and Black man, you have no power without the Black woman. He's looking for a solution. He's already heard the blame arguments. That's what he's been telling you. That's what he's telling you. So we have to understand. And he says, look, as we go further, some of the sisters that are coming on, they're saying, hey, look, listen, go listen to Q Butter. He's a brother that you can listen to that's going to give you some solid direction. So you have some women that come on the panel that are actually doing that, trying to get him to a space where he can get some solid direction, some understanding. They're dressing him to Q Butter. They even say, hey, Taz, he's somebody that you can listen to that can steer you in a correct direction. But they refuse to address what he's saying, that there are failures on both sides. There's failure on both sides. And until that's acknowledged, It doesn't matter what you say. You're only putting a Band-Aid on the gunshot wound of the effects of your pain. And that's it. And if you think that in this society where your daughters and your sons are still interacting with each other in these communities, that you think you're not responsible, or that you think a hands-off approach with black men is going to solve, or black boys is going to solve your issues, you're foolish. You're foolish because they're going to affect someone in your household. And you have to deal with the fact that there's a lot to be desired from both black men and black women in these communities. You can barely listen to a 19-year-old speak when he says he has experienced trauma at the hands of black men and black women. You can't even hear him. Some of you refuse to hear. But that's more of the case than not. And this is what he's saying, that the men around me have a resentment towards black women. Why? We got to deal with that. Because if we don't, we're going to have more R.Kellys in our communities. We got to deal with that. We got to deal with the cause and the effect of these predators that are not born, but they're being created. They're being created. And most of the time, they're created by the people that have the most influence on them in their lives. That's what I said earlier. Go back and study Boniface rings and deal with the circle of influence. So those are the things that we need to address. This circle, this cycle of blaming is a death sentence that you're bringing upon yourself. So again, we have to be cognizant and understand that we're creating these predators and not in the womb. But it's the responsibility of us, what we do with these children outside of the womb. That we're not protecting them as we seen in the Antoine Fisher story. We're not protecting them as we seen in the Kelly and R.Kelly case. We're not protecting them as we seen the numerous newspaper articles and clippings and Little Wayne's that we dealing with, and we're seeing the abuse of these young boys at the age of 11 at the hands of both men and women. That's what we have to understand here. We can't continue to ignore the cause. In the moment that you say that the cause is black men, you're dead. You just killed yourself. The moment that you say that the cause is only or all or majority black men, you're dead. You're dead. Because the cause doesn't show gender. The cause won't make a gender argument. It won't pit one against the other. The cause makes no separation. It has no color. It has no sex. That's it. That's it. So when we go around and we attack the male seed, and when you simply say, oh, it's the male seed, it's the black male seed, hashtag abort. That's the answer, right? That's the answer. But predators are not born. They're made by the people who have the closest circle of influence to them. That's where we are. That's the understanding. That's the disease. That's the infection we need to deal with. We can't do this without each other. Don't let anyone give you that lie and speak to you as if that's truth. No one can do that. No one can do that. So I'm going to close this out. And I suggest anybody who's just coming in, shout out to the Argument League, go back and watch the beginning of the stream. Go back and watch it. These are the things we have to learn how to understand. I keep telling people we have to see and don't see. We have to see and don't see. People think intelligence and solving problems begins with blame. It's not even in fact that if you want to solve an equation, you can't deal with the blame, especially in society. You have to deal with the cause, and then you go after it. And then you go after it. It's just like you attack any other disease. Usually, the medications that they give you is only dealing with the effects, not the cause. We have to look at this thing completely different, family. And I understand it and I get it. It takes time. But trust me, I'm relentless. But again, peace to the family, man. Shout out to you for tuning in. And again, I often say, take what you can and what you can't use. Don't use it. And if it's for you, it's for you. If it's not, it's not. But if it's only one that gets it, then your work is done, people. That's it. Peace.
Everywhere I go, you know I got the soccer with me. And that's just how it go until my Lord and Savior get me. Y'all do know I'll always love you. Rest in peace to Whitney. My cousins got delivered, yeah, they used to push the Britney. And I remember when I couldn't even spend a penny. Went from being nifty all the way to having plenty. Now everywhere I go, it's feeling just like Christmas, cause I have a girl. And I don't even know, but I just might take a trip to Nazareth. Where we going, Phil? Nazareth. Just got back from Nazareth. Got disciple with me like I just got back from Nazareth. Got disciple with me like I just got back from Nazareth. Where we going, Phil? Nazareth. Nazareth. Just got back from Nazareth. Got disciple with me like I just got back from Nazareth. Got disciple with me like I just got back from Nazareth. Yeah, I got disciple with me. They know we be moving through the city. Got a whole team on the same damn spray. Word to the enemy, you better not play. I ain't trying to hear nothing y'all trying to say. Got God in my heart, all in my x-ray. Straight from the bar and I came a long way from trapping that hey. Pull up to the scene with Ray Jose. Did it show my face, we ain't even gon' stay. Giving out blessings every day, then it come right back like underlay. We got everybody so happy, like hip parade. Once upon a time, the devil wanted beef with me, now he eat it. Chick-fil-A. Nazareth.